Yeah. Yeah, I think it was 300 grand, wasn't it? 300,000. Steve, are you ready for us?
Recording in progress.
Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
Welcome to our, excuse me, our workshop meeting. It is broadcast via YouTube Live. Link is washingtoncity.org/meetings. I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda for tonight.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the agenda for the Washington City Council workshop, the agenda for May 26, 2021.
Bundy, second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Item 2, discussion and review of the Washington Fields Design Standards. Drew? Did he go back to his office? You want to come out? Drew, are you there yet?
Want me to start until he comes?
Sure, would you please?
Somebody flipped up the screen. So Steve has that pulled up. Is it Steve doing that? Why don't we move on to the item 2 and come back? Would you mind doing that?
Item 3?
Yes.
Well, item 2 is the design. Item 3 is the
discussion.
Let's, if you don't mind, let's flip them unless you have a problem with it. Okay, there we go. You just want to make an entrance.
Evan Genesis 431. I like that. That's nice.
I just felt I wasn't there for council.
Haven't seen it like this.
But,
Oh, thank you, Drew.
That's not familiar.
I actually came in late, Mayor, just because I hadn't been in here and I just, wanted to see the shock on all 8 or 9 faces that I haven't been in this room for a while. It's a nice room. I remember it.
Okay.
So
Welcome back, Mr. Cotter.
I guess we're tonight, we just want to talk about, this is the kind of, I'm just showed you this. This is what EPG was a company that the city had entertained going into contract with to look at doing something on the fields for design guidelines. I think we did this at the end of 2019. I know it was before at least 3 of the new councilmen came on, that this was presented actually to the city council. I think it might have been October or November, I think, of 19. And then 2020 came, and the only thing we remember about 2020 is it's all COVID. And so everything got put on hold. These guys especially, they were told not to come to their offices. They're all working from home. It was, we didn't feel like we wanted to pursue much because a lot of this process was going to have open houses. And that was the last thing that you wanted to do with COVID-19 was have an open house. So we kind of put things on hold for a while. But I know this has been brought up in several meetings. So we wanted to put this on the agenda just to even see how the council felt in moving forward. But if you kind of want to go, this was the presentation. And so Steve, you want to just go to the next slide? We'll just hit each one. This is what the residents in 19 look like in the fields. We've had a few upgrades since, but no, this was just kind of how they gave, because when people think of the fields, this is one of the first things, especially if you're born and raised in Washington, that's what you found in the fields mostly, right? That was the highest populated living things down there at one time. So anyway, Steve, go to the next slide. This is just kind of, again, the table of contents, very simple, talked about some of the projects that we'll take a look at here in a minute. just, Steve, go to the next page with kind of read the objectives and goals up there. Mostly the goals I wanted to take a focus in on as we have this discussion tonight. The first goal was to develop a plan to ensure future development of Washington Fields to enhance economic development opportunities by building strong neighborhoods. The number 2 goal was to create a thriving community that is sought out and encourages healthy growth, which actually has been happening down there for quite a while. It's one of the hot places that people seek to find a home. And number 3 is to finalize a vision for the Washington Fields that has buy-in from the entire community. So those were the goals that the EPG was going to try to incorporate in their process as they went through this. Steve, next slide. Keep going. This is just a study area context, so you can see that kind of burnt orange was going to be the focus. So that basically, we were looking at mostly Washington Fields and west, basically from the river down to the beginning of Stookie Farms. Was going to be the target area for this particular goal of this project, and that was it. So, okay, Steve, head to the next one. And this was interesting. I don't know if a lot of you, the aerials is kind of what 1993 there on the far left, heading to 03, 13, and 17. You can just see the transition. We're on that far left in 93. It looks like a typical farming area. You can see all the rectangular fields everywhere. 03, you can see more houses cropping in on that north end, just south of the river. By 13, what a transition in those 10 years. You probably saw at least 40-50% of the fields convert over to subdivisions. I mean, as you go to 17, which is still 4 years past from here still, you can just see all the dots of the houses, and you don't see many of those rectangle fields that you see in that 1993 photo. So that's just a bit of that transition over that time of 24 years plus the 4 cents. So Steve, next slide, please. Keep going. We'll just kind of hit through here. They just went through and took some pictures of existing. You probably recognize many of these streets, intersections, what it looks like right now as you drive down, especially Washington Fields Road. Steve, next slide. And this is just some of the other aspects, not even the streetscapes, but just some of the things you'll see.
So sorry, Drew, on the last one, what are the arrows trying to show me?
Well, Steve, head back there once. Those are just the viewpoint. So the picture with the arrow above, if you go to the slide below it, it's showing you where that picture was kind of taken from, that triangle area. Does that help you? And then the next slide on the far right is where they were standing when they took that photo. Just to give you that view, you know, from that perspective is all that was doing. Okay, Steve, forward. And they just went and pinned out some of the different things that they found in the fields, a variety of different looks on street finishes, the landscape with the meandering sidewalk, and picture number 1. Picture number 2, no curb gutter, per se, of just heading down on a street finish. Number 5, I'll just stay on that top with the odd numbers. No street at all. I mean, surface, just basically dirt finishes is which we have in some of the places down there. And then number 7, which you do have the asphalt, but then you just have the bar ditch, so to speak, on each side of the street. That's kind of what you find existing right now. Number 2 then goes to what our standard street kind of looks like in a lot of the fields, the curb, gutter, sidewalk, then the landscaping. Number 4 is just a variety of different on both sides of that. Number 6 is actually in Skyview Estates, I think, where it had, you know, the streets, but then they had the bar ditches and, you know, a little bit of parking on the side. That was a, can't remember if that was a bonus density or just a straight zoning, and that's how they wanted to keep that. That was before my time. Skyview, even though there was only 2 houses built in it, and then it went into foreclosure. Salisbury Homes picked it up, finished it out, but kept the same theme. Picture number 8, just another different view of kind of no sidewalks. I think that's probably Pineview Estates, I would imagine. Yeah. And so those are kind of what's out there in that PUD. So those are just some streetscapes that we have right now. Steve, next slide, please. These are just some of the views of the homes and what they look like, some of the architecture finishes in different parts of those subdivisions within the fields. So, okay, Steve, next slide. And this is just a few pictures to give a little character at the time when they went through from their perspective. This is what was, I found a little unique. This is as they drove all the places down in that target area. These are the 8 photos they decided to pick because this is what they felt stood out as kind of the character to their point of view. And seeing, you know, Pineview Park, just some of the different finishes at some of the PUDs that we have. And just a feel for what the fields, what's undeveloped and what has been developed for city stuff is out there. So a bit of the character to their perspective. Next slide, Steve. Keep going. So these are the next couple of slides are the last photos within, you know, their little presentation. This is Verada and Buckeye, Arizona. You know, and this is just a perspective. Again, they're just showing up in the black and the white is the whole subdivision developed area. Those white splotches are kind of the open areas that they're pointing out and some of their views that you see. The photo right below it is like the 10,000 foot view of that finished subdivision development. And then the other 4 photos are, you know, some streetscapes from looking down. Again, it's where that picture was taken, giving you that view in that triangle area of what this particular development did was to, I think what they ended up doing is doing higher cluster densities, giving them same amount of density, but they were able to make a bunch of smaller lots in exchange for some of these corridors that they were making, you know, point of on this. So that's the Verada and Buckeye, Arizona, as an, you know, they were just going to put this out as options of things that can be done. Steve, next slide. And this is in Marley Park, Surprise, Arizona. Again, up in that top left-hand corner is the black and white, just showing the white splotches of the open space areas. And then you can see how they clustered some of the homes on the view right below it, that 10,000 foot view of the development. Seeing that, how it laid out. Again, if you look at some of the overheads on those 2 views up in the top, middle, and to the right there, that just shows you basically that clustering of what that did. You can see how those homes are kind of tightly packed in. That's not all of the variety, but in this one, it looks like that might be quite a bit of what they did on that and just had some of that open streetscape. As again, these are just concepts of projects that they've done or things that are out there. Steve, next slide. Ladera Ranch, Orange County, California. Again, just giving you different views and perspectives of what they've done on streets. You know, you can see in the bottom middle picture, that's a corner lot there. And what they've done in this particular development on some of the main streets, they kicked the houses back a bit, had a little bit extra landscaping. And you can see it's a lot of great foliage, but sometimes I see these pictures and I think about our drought right now and think, it'd be kind of hard to push that because we don't have the water to do so. We'd love to do that. But this is, again, was just a development out of Southern California. And just, again, doing some clustering of homes and doing some wider streetscapes, you know, pathways, et cetera, to give that open feel instead of it. Some of the worst places I've seen, we saw 2 from Arizona. I'm from Arizona, and I remember going to the valley. We call the valley, it's the Phoenix Mesa metropolitan area. And many times you drive down through there and you're on 6 lanes of road, curb gutter sidewalk, and a 6-foot block wall. And that's 80% of your main roads getting around. That's how you see Mesa. And, you know, Gilbert luckily caught wind of that and didn't do the same thing. As you head farther south, Chandler did even a better job. But poor Mesa is used to be one of the nicest places, you know, back in the 70s. It was just a gorgeous city and the way they did it. But as it built out, they just lost control. And that's what they ended up with, was these block wall, we call them block wall corridors, you know, especially as you got into planning. That's the thing you want to stay away from, because when you drive down it, all you want to do is just push on the gas and go. You don't enjoy the city you're going through at all. So this kind of helps break up that kind of a, not being caught up in that trap of, the block corridor. So Steve, final subdivision development. Well, this is actually still part of Ladera, I guess. So this was just some different places within the development, having again the boulevards that are again landscaped, et cetera. So they were just bringing this as some concept things that they might put in, and that they've incorporated that into the survey that's out there, and we're just waiting to get the notices out to have people take it. But we kind of put that on hold because we felt the council wanted to actually take a look at this and see if they still wanted to proceed, or if they want to say, is it worth it to keep going with, the few places that we have actually that it might hit. Now, again, we were hoping, when they got hired and the previous city administrator was hoping maybe to hit more on the commercial side, and we probably still would have in that that still will be part of it. But I guess we're having a discussion tonight to see if this council is still wanting to proceed, because the surveys are ready. I've got printed up flyers that we're going to hopefully get sent out, but we'll hit that target area and maybe a few more. But we just wanted to open the discussion for you gentlemen to see how you felt about this, if you still want to head that way, or if there's another direction you may want to go.
Drew, do you have some samples of the questionnaire that's going to be sent out?
I can send you the link. I think we can get you a link of the survey. I think we can put you on to that without going into the survey and start, because we don't want to start it right away and then have a gap. But I think I have a copy of it that we could probably send out to you, and it would just show you the questions they're going to get asked and how we go. So if you wanted to take that time, I was hopefully going to try to get that, but I just ran out of time. Trying to find that. It's in my email somewhere, and I can go dig that up. And if you guys wanted to think about that, look at the survey and what they're proposing out there.
Well, I guess what I would look at in that survey is whether it addresses what we see in our master plan as our vision. The Washington Fields should always have a very agricultural farming feel to me. And I just want to make sure that is something that's been relayed to this group. I would be anxious to hear what the rest of the council's opinion are about this group. I personally really like the way we plan. I think that we are boots on the ground here and we live here. And I think that we would be very able to address the vision that we would like to see, not only as a council, but we could engage our community maybe more directly. But with me personally, again, I don't want to be redundant, but I want to make sure that this survey would address the initial questions that we want answered. And again, it would be the agricultural feel of the fields and being able to keep that as part of the main theme, maybe even having some, and I can't think of a better word, maybe rustic designs, those type of things, which may not be a first thought for these individuals, because you can see in their examples that it's not much of a rustic or farmland kind of feel.
Can I jump into on that?
Oh, yeah.
Just to piggyback, appreciate what Councilman Ivy said. I agree that primarily with this survey, I would like to have the feedback for the residents who live there and are affected by that. I want to know how they feel about this transformation of the fields. And I think with a combination of the survey and of what becomes of the feedback from the citizens, hopefully we can come up with something that allows us to retain that agricultural heritage, that look and feel of the fields, even though most of those fields are now subdivisions. And that would be my biggest hope.
Yep. And there are different things. They gave people options. They said, out of the 4 photos, which one most appeals to you? I read through some of the questions, but it's been a while since I've gone back.
Are they using these photos?
They might have used some of these, but they're using some of even our local things to just put in, and it's basically appearances from street views is what they're going, is this one most appealing? Is this one, and people, the question basically just says, which of the 4 photos is most appealing? They click on either A, B, C, or D, and then they ask them what would, they're simple questions. And we try to make sure that it didn't get long, because if you make a survey too long, you lose the people. So we told them to keep it very short, but I'll be more than glad to get you a copy of what they proposed, to that.
How would you distribute it?
Well, it's going to be online. I have a flyer that I haven't gone out and printed. There's a
You just-
QR code. You
just
go on.
Encourage them to go to the link.
You go to the link, you can put your phone on it, or you can, I'm not sure, there's different ways, or you can type in directly. But you go in, there's a link, you can take it on our webpage. We're going to have 3 or 4 places, but we want to get every door, at least in the target area. And that's up to you. We can even go, so many feet beyond. We could try to hit the whole, but for every door you do, you got to get it hand delivered. Or we could mail it, but then that gets quite pricey to send it out, but that is an option.
Let's do that. Let's have the survey come back to us. So from my perspective, I was here when they presented this, and I was kind of skeptical about an engineering firm coming in and actually creating value with it, because what some of the concerns were exactly what's been voiced tonight, where we have a community, people are buying into the community, but it's growing so fast that it's losing its character and its feel. And so when they presented this to us, they actually did a very good job of giving some ideas and some options that really opened my mind in ways that I thought I got really excited about what might come from this survey, to say, okay, but we were struggling with how to preserve what we have and what best to do. I think this is a total miss here from what we said and what they delivered. Honestly, the goals, I think they flipped the goals completely, inverted in priority. I would have put 3 first and 2 second and 1 third. And, but again, they had come in when they presented to us and sold it to us. They came in and I got really excited that they were going to actually help us with some creative ways to do city planning and city designing that was outside of my realm of expertise. And I honestly think this is just a complete miss.
Well,
So,
but let me back up,
no,
because
I don't want to back up too much, because I want to keep going where I'm at. But so if the survey is as complete of a miss as this is, I want to take a shot at it from the council, because I just don't want to see like those 3 pictures and say, which one of those do you like the most? I think we need to kind of maneuver it into a place where it actually is going to be beneficial to us. And I think we need to be really careful about the scripting, because if we say, do you love this field? We darn well better have a way to actually preserve that field if that's what we're going to pitch to the citizens. We need to be careful. Everybody would love just open space, but we've got to do the hard work and actually get in and figure out ways to preserve fields and do those kind of things. So anyways, I'll let you respond.
I want to go back. They didn't send this to me to give to you tonight. This was the original document from the get-go. I just brought it to you because I had some extra ones of what was given, because I have new council members that didn't get the pitch you got. This is the first time they're seeing that.
Well, so
I didn't want you to be misunderstood that this is something
I kind
they
of
brought
reacted
back.
to it the same way at the time,
Yeah.
but he started pitching back to us some different options and that's what I got excited about, because those types of options and those types of creative things that have been done elsewhere that have had success, that's what I don't know. And I was hoping that they could actually render that, and they had some good success with some other locations, and that's where city management at the time brought them in and got them involved. So
So that's what they will do.
suggest-
That's what they'll do. Go ahead.
Just a question, maybe a suggestion, as opposed to having these photos from somewhere else. We have some real live local examples that we can show, like 3650 South, for example, on the south side. I think a little bit west of where you live. There's a streetscape there. It's not, you don't have the wall right behind the sidewalk.
Right.
So there's a good photo that citizens of the community can relate to. They can drive by it and see it. And we have some bad examples as well. And St. George has some examples of some streetscapes. So I would just suggest maybe something more localized that people can relate to. But let me ask you, Drew, currently then, let's take 3650 South, for example. I forget the name of the development there, but I know it came into the council years ago, and there was a lot of discussion about having a streetscape along that section. So currently, we don't really have anything that tells someone that that's what we're expecting and that's what we want to see, right?
We don't.
Or
But
is that what we're trying to do here? Is trying to get?
That's what I have been doing since I've been here, and and I've been telling folks, hey, I am not going to take a plat to the city. And if you look at all your subdivisions lately, well, at least since I've been here, I've tried to get at least a landscape strip of 15 to 20 foot all the way around some of those, especially on our major, and most of them are on a bigger road. I tell them, you are not going to get this through, because First of all, I told them I'd probably recommend denial just because you're trying to put a block wall on the backside of a sidewalk and a curb and gutter and create what I feel is some of the worst planning you can ever do. So haven't had anybody buck the system real bad. Some of them have, because of other things, maybe end up with a 10-foot landscape strip. And because I saw why, I said, okay, but I try to get at least a 15-foot one there. We're actually working with Public Works and trying to put meandering sidewalks through that now to get people right off of the curb. And some of those turned out real nice. In fact, we had some of those in our photos in this thing.
I guess I'm thinking that if we, in my mind, the guidelines we're talking about here is something that as a developer comes in to develop a certain parcel of land, that they know that that's what's going to be expected, similar to a trail or road master plan and such, that they know what the expectation is from the city. And I guess that's what I'm looking at in these guidelines. Is that correct?
Yeah, that'll have that. That's what they're trying to get, and they'll put that in their survey, and they'll come back. Now, the survey is that they've been doing this a lot. That there's a science to doing surveys, especially in land planning, and so they put those and they have key questions, and then from that they get that feedback and then bring it back and say, okay, because the way these people answered this question, I've got 3 or 4 setups I'd really like you people to see, and that's where the open houses come in. So they say, because of the results of our survey, here's some ideas. And then in the open houses, people will literally go up like we do in a general plan amendment. Most of you have been to one of those. You'll go up and people will actually put dots saying this is the streetscape out of, because of the answer to this question, they proposed, some things, and people say, yeah, this is the one I like best. And so they'll get that tabulation to you. And then ultimately it's your decision. As the city council, the planning commission should play a big part of that in the city council.
So
after that's all.
Maybe we're further off than I thought. So maybe we should just have this group come back in, present what they've actually done, reinvest. I mean, because I'm the only council member who's here that was here when this was presented. Not that the problems are so much different, but the council's a lot different. We probably ought to just reassess if this is even worth going forward with.
Well, that's what I say. Take a look at the survey, because a lot of what you wanted them to do, the comments you just told me about, they did put them into your survey. I think it'd be great if all of you look at your survey and take a look at that.
Paid for the survey then to be prepared.
Yeah, we've, just to let you know, our total contract with them, which is a smoking deal for what they're proposing to give you, was $22,200 basically. Okay, of getting all this, doing all the photos, all that stuff, and we have paid them. We've paid them to date $16,700 roughly. So we only have a couple of bills left with them, and that's the part of those open house things that they're going to do and formulate everything. Again, these planning companies are really good at what they do.
Where's this group? Are they here locally, or are they?
They're based out of Scottsdale, Arizona.
Okay.
But they have an office in Salt Lake, and we're working with the office in Salt Lake. Okay. They've branched out into Utah. They brought to you guys, well, you weren't on there, but if you remember that apartment complex that Steve Howcroft did, they kept trying, and you remember that when they kept bringing you so-so products, and that last one you approved, I think we all have to admit that was like, compared to what had come through the door, that was a home run for what they brought in. It turned out really nice, even though you may say, well, it's still an apartment project, but it's still one of the best looking ones and never did get built yet. So they're really good. I like the work they do. So, but I need to kind of back up on my comment a little bit. We do have some photos of our area, of our city. Yeah, if you went through in those pages.
I would suggest, if I were looking at this, I don't know where these are, but if I want to drive down that street and see what it's like, I would want to know what street that is. Just, okay, 3090 South or 2000 South, whatever it is, just put that on there so that I could go look if I'm a citizen and I take this seriously and I want to, fill out a survey.
I don't know if they're going to use these pictures. Again, this is just what they brought to the council saying, hey, we've driven your fields. Here's what we see. Yeah. As the outsider going through, these are the things that stood out to us for good or for worse.
So
they
Drew,
brought that.
I wasn't super impressed with the site analysis either. So I don't want to, but I don't want that. In fact, I think that they took maybe some of the worst spots of our city and put up and then contrasted with other areas. I think that you could have put some of our neighborhoods and shown what a well-designed community ought to look like. So I don't know that we have a problem. I'm still interested though in the survey And I'm not going to judge what might be a finished product by what the site analysis is. So
Yeah,
I'm
again, this
curious
was
to
just
see
this was the
the
kickoff thing.
questions.
Yeah.
And then
Those
the
were-
recommendations, because there may be some recommendations. And I really liked what Councilman Bundy said is, we have a trails master plan, a roads master plan. It's kind of a high level guide. I
Mhm.
mean, if there are a few little things that come out of this where we've already spent most of the money on this, I don't see a reason to back off of it now. And I certainly see no harm in going forward with this survey. And sounds like they know what they're doing. I'd be curious to see the questions, but I don't know if
Well,
this
that's why
council should
I'm going to
or
send
can
you.
influence those.
I'm going to send you guys that, we'll give you a thing where you can go in and take a look.
Well, let me play off Councilman Staley's comments. Or I'm not sure about backing off, but I do want to make sure that we are correctly aligned with our goals, because I'm worried that we're not. And I want to make sure. And really, what I was most excited about was the conversations we would have with them and the conversations we would have with the public. And that's so we've just had this. We've had a presentation. We had a start and a massive gap. I'm thinking we probably better make sure our goals are really aligned so that we actually get those, because this is the part of it that I was most excited about, where we're just not getting it. We're not getting any feedback or conversation or that uplifts and adds to what we already do. I think we're all kind of just staying entrenched in what we already think and believe. So
Drew, do you think for the next meeting, we can send out the survey link and then have them participate, even if it's just virtually, in our next meeting, and kind of give some, so that everybody can ask the questions after they've seen the survey and we can move from there? Is that?
Oh yeah, I have no problem getting, I'm going to either send them a copy of the survey just so they see what it is in it. Not that they have to answer any of the questions, but they can go through it and act like you're taking it. You can see each one, probably would be the best thing to do.
So Drew, I guess my interest, or not necessarily a concern, but something that needs to be understood, is that this company will make suggestions.
Yes.
And it's, in the past, we've had some situations where I believe that the results of that study were a little bit overemphasized in some of our discussions. So I would just want it known that, these will be suggestions that we can or may not implement into our general plan or into the zoning, the design standards. And maybe they will give us some good ideas. I was very pleasantly surprised with the financials. I was actually thinking that was going to be much bigger numbers, but we only owe another 5,500 to complete that. I think it would be good interest, in our best interest, to move forward and complete that and pay the balance. But even if that gets us some good ideas, then that'd be good. But I need to reiterate that I have all the confidence in the world in our city to be able to design and build and set standards that incorporates our city standards and goals.
And that's why we only went to this extent, the 22,000 extent, because believe me, some of these, like, and probably Councilman Coates can relate to this because their company's doing one right now for somebody. And I know it'll have a big price tag because all that's involved in it. But if you go out and get these studies done, have a general plan amendment, you're up into the $200,000 just to get a general plan amendment, so that's what I'm saying. For us to get this feedback, and that's mostly what we're going to do, is get the survey out there. People are going to answer the questions. They're going to take that tabulation, give you those answers and say, here's what your people, we're looking at and liked or want to see.
So
And
Drew,
then you can do with that what you want to do with that.
so your opinion is that we ought to finish it out, right? I mean, that will be helpful to you in the long term, right? I mean, to get
It
this done
can,
and-
like I say, I can play both sides of the debate on it. But I think it'd still be great information to have, especially now with all the,
I guess I'm just
people that
thinking
live
is,
there.
and I think I've said this before, but 75% of our staff is in a regulatory position of some sort. And if you
Yep.
have some guidelines, then you can refer to those and you don't have to fight the fight every time something comes in.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to say, hey, the majority of your people all came back and said, this is what they really like. So, for you to come and say, well, nobody wants this, we'll say, well, we just did a survey and 80% or 87% said, this is what they really want, so it's hard for people to say, well, darn it, I guess I shouldn't have brought that up because the survey said 87% really like this. So it gives you some backing to move in the direction that you feel the people want to see. And that's what's
It just
great.
sounded
about it.
like-
Between commercial and residential at all, or is it just generalized?
It's over both. It hits certain things.
So it's just
You know,
a
which is good.
general survey.
It's the
And
general
this would
feel.
only go out to the Washington Fields area, or was it?
Well,
for
that's
all-
your targeted area. So you let me know if you want to go, because again, sometimes if you take data from other people, that kind of can maybe skew, or maybe that's what again, it can work for your favor or against you. either way. So I just, whatever the council, I mean, we can go X amount of feet beyond that bubble, or we can,
I like the
I'm
orange
at
section.
your
I like that
discretion to
the
say.
entire orange section of the Washington Fields, not just the line, but that entire.
Yeah, I was thinking everything
bench.
south of the river.
Yes.
Does that sound, because those people, even though they may be on that east bank, they drive right through all
Yeah, I
this.
live on the bench there, and we all associate.
Oh, now
this.
I see. No, I'm just kidding.
So
I
Drew-
want to be, no, I was
once
thinking
you
the
see
same
your
thing.
survey-
I want to be
I
south.
hear my neighbors too, and we
Yeah, no, I
all
want to be south of
feel
the
like
river
we're
is what I
south of the
felt.
river is, I think, is appropriate.
Yeah.
So Drew, the one comment I'd have is I'd like to see an exhibit that shows what's left of the fields. I'd like to know what property we're really talking about.
developable property that is yet to.
Well, that's a funny word, because you talk to anybody that owns it, it's all, anything I own is for sale, you know, that kind of mentality,
Anything
Or
that's
not for
current,
sale.
or not
Or
for
never,
sale.
not in my lifetime. It's
Well, that's like the one sign that was down in the fields that says property not for sale, inquiries call. That one just, that made me laugh every time I went by. You know, it's like, don't bother me but if you want to know, call this number.
Well,
So-
but I think you know what we mean. I
Yep.
think that's a good point. I think you know what we mean.
Yeah, no, I think what we'll do is I'll send you that copy of that survey. You take it, look at it and say, yeah, this looks like things I really like to get back out of this. And this can,
But
steer us in that
Can you do
direction.
that though? Can you give us an idea of some of those, the developable properties that are left when it comes back to the council next time?
yeah, probably one of the big ones you're making
Well,
decisions on tonight. On
thinking
that
of-
one corner.
I'm thinking of, Drew, of the zoning map that we currently have, that you can actually have the photo underneath it and you can pretty well see. Is that not clear enough?
We could have our GIS.
Actually, I'd
we could
like
have
to
our
give
GIS
you-
do it. They could
Yeah,
give you
I
a
mean,
percentage build out and acres remaining, and
Yeah,
Could
because
do that
I mean,
in
we
no
can
time.
get kind of close with that, but it's always, because
Yeah.
it's a moving target with things that are in phase this, or this, but they're still not built on, but they're in different degrees. It's not
What
done
I'm
yet,
talking
but yeah.
about, it hasn't been applied for at the council. If
All
it's-
the
or
Larry
if it's
Adams
been-
property. There you go. I just narrowed it down for you. It's almost, I joke a little bit, but that's
I know you're
almost,
joking, but that's my point. is
that's
that
about what's
there's-
left.
There's not much left.
There's
And
not.
so I just want to be very clear. What are we talking about for what's left? So I'd
Yeah,
love to
because your
see an
neighborhood
exhibit.
may have some blank dirt, but it's already planned and ready to go, all the way down to the airport
I'm just
in
saying,
essence. So
if we can work on that map, that would be great to have the GIS department build a map that just shows what's.
okay, I think Dale can probably pop that up in color, and maybe I'll just have him do an aerial or a thing, and then just maybe hopefully just color the areas that are still undeveloped. That way it'll give you can look at that color and say, wow, that off yellow compared to everything else is only, looks like maybe 15, 20%, 30%, whatever it may be. But I think we'll try to get that ready for you too. So Mayor, I'd just say we come back in 2 weeks. I'll send this out in the next day or two. And then we'll kind of go from there on the survey and how you feel. And if you want to tweak some of the questions, now's the time to do it. Trying to tweak the photos might end up costing us some more money because and it's not bad. I think they did a pretty dang good job with the survey. It's very general, but it'll lead you and lead them to finding answers to the way people feel about how they want to see it go. So thank you, Mayor,
Thank you.
Council.
All right, we'll move on to item 3, discussion update on the Washington City alcohol ordinance. Turn the time over to our attorney.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'll come to the podium since I do have some slides and things. So a little background on the discussion point for today is this is the follow-up to the discussion that ensued about a month and a half ago when there was an interested business operator that was ultimately wanted to present to the council, and they were seeking what is called local consent, which is essentially the city's consent or indication that the city would issue them a license to operate an alcohol-based restaurant facility within its state. You were all here. That consent wasn't granted. It wasn't put on an agenda to be considered. The request was, hey, let's back up a little higher. Let's look at what we've got. Talk about that, understand what we've got so that if the council has the desire, they can move in a direction. The purpose of these slides is really just to give you a view as to what your city code does with alcohol laws, give you a view as to how state law handles alcohol laws, And then the last slide is simply a brief summary of how a local city has personalized, the state laws to their situation. Steve, if you go to the second slide, the first two slides, I'm going to walk through basically a summary of Washington City's code that has 6 classes of alcohol licenses. Class A is for the sale of original container beer on premise for consumption off premise. There's a container size restriction, which is a quart or smaller. And then the code has a quota, which was the city would issue population divided by 1,000 of those. You'll notice original container beer. Those are all important terms that are important to the meaning there, so these would be beer beverages that are not on tap. They're a beer can, a beer bottle, a drink container that is shipped into that facility and sold in the same receptacle that it was shipped into with. Class B is the sale of original container beer for consumption on premise. Again, the only difference here with the last one was consumption off premise. So you'd go buy the 12 pack and take it somewhere else to drink. Class B is saying you were to consume it on premise with a similar container size restriction and with a 70% of revenues food requirement in connection with a Utah license that was called on premises beer retailer. You'll see in subsequent slides, Utah no longer uses that license type. And so we're referencing a license type that Utah has gone away from. Class C is the sale of original container beer for consumption off premises with the same size restriction and also with the same food restriction in what would be in conjunction with the Utah license for restaurant liquor. You'll see on Class B and C, Washington City Code had not implemented any quotas, which means the city was able to issue as many of those licenses as could have qualified through the city's system. If you go to the next slide, Steve, if the council's interested in digging any deeper into its code, you'll see the reference there at the top. It's subsection or section 3, subsection 2, and then you just want to read subsections 1 through 18. Class D of a liquor license issued through Washington City is the sale of original container beer or on draft with a size not to exceed 2 liters. So this now allows the original container or an open container with a larger size on premise and in connection with the Utah license for on premises beer retailer. Again, in a subsequent slide, you'll see that Utah no longer uses that license type. The population quota for that one was population over 6,000. The interesting thing here is Utah or Washington's code is very specific that it only allows beer in this category. So other liquor types would not have qualified. Class E is the sale of original container beer or on draft, size not to exceed 2 liters, in conjunction with a private club license from the state of Utah. And that one had a quota of population over 20,000. Class F is the sale of original container beer for consumption off premise in connection with the Utah license for package agency or state store. In Utah and under Utah law, the state of Utah is the only entity that may operate a package agency or state store. So Class F is really just applying to the state liquor store. Any questions about Washington's license types and how that goes? So we'll go to the next slide. And this slide was intended to just identify the issues that exist in Washington's current code. By definition, Washington defines beer with alcohol percentages by weight and by volume, and then also that it is a beverage obtained by the fermentation of a malted grain. Washington City's definition of beer is not inclusive of other alcohol types that are allowed under state law, such as liquor and wine. Washington City's definition of 3.2% by weight or 4% by volume is also more restrictive than current state law, which is 4% by weight and 5% by volume. And so when the state adjusted their percentages a few years back, Washington didn't. Washington City Code does contain definitions for alcohol products, liquor, and wine, but its license classes do not permit any of those other alcoholic products to be licensed under Washington City's current code. And so Washington City's license classes really are just for the sale of beer. under the conditions that I had outlined in those license classes. And so the question some of you might be having is, why on earth is it so out of date? And the answer is, when it was written, it probably conformed with state law at that time, but this element of city code is really old. And the legislature has been very proactive in updating it. It's almost annually that there's some adjustment to the state's liquor laws. And I don't think Washington City's been following those as far as updating the code in response to those. And so my guess would be that when it was written, it was consistent with state law at the time, but state law has just been pretty rapidly changing. And we're now at the point where it's probably a good time to talk about what we want our city alcohol law to look like. Any questions about city code related issues or the issues that I've identified there?
I guess just a question I have is if we are outdated and we're not in line with other communities and the state guidelines, doesn't that cause a little conflict with those that are selling the product? I mean, how do they know? I mean, they're probably, well, I probably should say that.
So-
They're probably not in compliance with the law.
If we have an establishment that sells more than beer, are they complying with our code currently? Not as it's written and strictly interpreted.
So is it standard practice to just go with state code? And not
That's what
have-
most cities are doing. That's what you'll see in the last slide the city is doing. And the reason is this is an area of law where the legislature has taken a very proactive and a very controlling interest. In fact, they've granted the state the monopoly to distribute all alcohol. And so the best practice in this area is, instead of trying to make your own definitions and create your own protocol, you should just tag to the states and then tailor it to your city in other ways that aren't definitional.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I just had a real general question. So the population, so it's a license of that class per 1,000 or per 6,000. So that's one license for that.
Correct. So when
Area
the prior
population.
discussion, the council was told that the city's current quota is population over 20,000. But you'll notice in those definition types, the establishment that we have that holds one of those licenses is not contemplated within our definition at all. Right. And so again, that's showing you that our license class is not even consistent with what's being practiced by some of our license holders.
Would it be possible for us to be more restrictive in compliant with state law if we chose? Now, I know beer is packaged at the state rate, but just for question's sake,
I'm not sure what your question is.
could Washington be more restrictive than the state code, or are we bound by the state code?
So are you talking about alcohol percentage, like create our own alcohol class?
No, I'm just, if we had a brewer come in, they would have to adhere to what the
So
state standard is.
state law preempts city code, and the legislature has made it very specifically clear that state law will govern production of alcohol, import and sale and distribution of alcohol. So we couldn't preempt the state's positions on that. We could probably say we want to have lower alcohol percentages in our city, kind of like we have right now. Our problem is we're not enforcing those, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, and so another area where we could be possibly more strict is the population quotas. We could say, look, we don't want to be quite as open-ended as maybe the legislature was, and we could change that quota to one that we think better suits us. Any other questions on just Washington City and how we're doing it? So the next slide, Steve, if you'll take us to that, this is a quick summary of Utah's Alcohol Act. And again, I point out there that they've got the definitions of beer and liquor and the alcohol content definitions currently adopted by the state are 5% by volume, 4% by weight. And so with the folks that drink and are informed on alcohol laws, that's really the concentration of alcohol in a certain beverage. A few years ago, Utah adjusted it upwards to these levels. And so currently that's the state law definition. Our definition, of course, is lower than that. The state also has quotas for license types. And so the legislature itself has determined that they don't want it open-ended. And their quotas are also tied to population. One of the things that's happened in this state is some of your urban areas that are maybe less conservative have allowed lower quotas. And so there's a proliferation of alcohol establishments in urban areas. Frequently, their alcohol establishments are licenses, when the state does their math, may actually correlate with populations that are outside of that urban center. But because the state says we'll issue this many licenses over population, regardless of where they're situated, we kind of got this kind of just a collection of alcohol outlets in urban areas. That's also influenced by the fact that a lot of municipalities have been just like Washington and have said, you know, we don't want them everywhere. We're going to issue quotas so that limit how many licenses can be issued in our city. The last bullet point there, these are the license classes that the state uses. And so you'll remember ours are class A, B, C, D, E, and F. The state has an off-premises beer. They have a resort. They have a hotel, alcohol license, an arena, an event. Then they have a category called retail, which is restaurant, bar, airport lounge, on-premise banquet, on-premise beer, reception center, beer-only restaurant, and hospitality amenity. And so the legislature's gone to a license class that just really tries to describe the type of use that would be contemplated under that. And if I had a recommendation tonight, I would suggest that Washington City track that logic. I think it's easier to understand, easier to, when you read the code, to see what's being discussed. And then within those definitions, you can still build into it carton sizes. You can build into it quotas as far as how many you want to allow per population. But rather than class A, B, C, D, E, and F, you could have specific license types. Any questions about the state's statute on alcohol?
Yes. Does the state govern alcohol that is purchased on Amazon or through the mail? How does that even work?
Well,
Is this all irrelevant?
the state has given itself the monopoly of all alcohol distribution in the state. So
Can you not? I don't even know. Can
Every-
you not order alcoholic beverages through and have them shipped to you?
in theory, they're not supposed to ship to you, but you know, in theory, you're not supposed to ship illegal drugs into the state, and people find a way to get illegal things shipped into the state. But per state law, all distribution of alcohol products should flow through the state's alcohol monopoly. And so every alcohol institution, whether it's, you know, a private club like the Elks or a country club, whether it's a restaurant with alcohol sales, whether it's a bar, all of those are required per state law to buy from the state's distribution monopoly. And so there's somebody at the state who has a significant influence in the type and the quantity and the brands of alcohol that are offered by the state of Utah, because somebody makes that decision at some point. I'm sure it's business based. It's probably somebody that's got broad experience in the industry that just looks to see what's available and makes decisions as to which of those brands and types of alcohol the state of Utah is going to stock and offer to its retailers.
Do we have an idea of what our numbers are at right now for our current city licenses for any type of alcohol or? beer
I didn't
license?
come prepared to answer those. I know you've got one bar license. And then your other outlets would be convenience stores or grocery stores that essentially sell beer in containers of 12, 18 packs. And then you would have some restaurants. If you look at Red Robin, you look at Coral Cafe, you look at St. Helens, Green Springs. And so you've essentially got three categories. One that's got a bar license that, on my understanding, isn't currently operational. Those that are operational are convenience stores that are selling just beer in cases for off-premise consumption, and then restaurants that are selling mixed options for on-premise consumption with food. And so really you've got three of the types that are currently operating within your city. You know, you look at the state's list and you think, oh, maybe we would want to have the option for a hotel by the airport to serve some drinks, right? The state has law that contemplates that. And if this city wanted to include that within their code, we certainly could. The other one is an arena or hospitality type thing. And it all depends on what's going to happen within the spaces that get developed. But this council can choose which license types it wishes to offer within this city.
Well, as you work on this going forward, my interest would be that we don't designate one area of the city as kind of the area where all the bars are. Because if it is based on population, it would be possible to do like Salt Lake has done in some other cities in southern Utah where that has become something that needs to be addressed. So I'm not sure what that would look like, the verbiage or how that would be done, but it would be nice to be able to keep the licenses spread out, I guess, would be my interest.
Yeah, I think this council gets to determine that. That's right now, the way your code is written is until there's a population increase to 40,000 or more, no other bar license is coming. Once it hits 40,000, if you haven't made some designations in your code, one will come and they can come anywhere that zoning allows. It could be right next to your other bar, as long as the zoning allowed, and they could have a right to apply for that and then go to the state and get it if the state has any more that remain. And so I think if there's part of my message is this is a good code that we can update. And two, this is a code where I think the council can really give their view as to how they want their community to look like as far as alcohol sales and alcohol consumption go for the future.
Well, on my input, I'd like to see us just match state code on definitions. And I think that's the best way to go because it is a changing thing and don't think we need to revisit this every year with how proactive they are. I do think we need to reduce the amount of population per bar. Relook at that as a group and decide what's best for the community, but I think it's too stringent right now. We should probably fall in line with adjacent communities are doing as well.
Are we right now, for if we had a bar license, that would be basically over 70% of their revenue. So for a restaurant that serves liquor and beer, they've got to be 70% food, correct?
Correct.
If they don't meet that threshold, then they become classified as a bar.
They don't get to pass back and forth between
They
classifications.
would have to have
They have to come with their
the license.
class and
And
apply for it.
what class then would that be under, and what would we call that?
So if you use Coral Cafe, our code doesn't have a class for Coral Cafe.
Let's say we're now moving towards aligning with the Utah code. Where
So,
would that?
so
would
if
that
we wanted to
be
align with the Utah code, Coral Cafe would be a restaurant. And or Coral Cafe would be a bar.
a retail
Yeah.
bar?
Red Robin would be a restaurant.
And so,
So the restaurant always has a food element and the bar does not. The bars are strictly and heavily regulated. There's trainings that are mandatory. There's times of the day within which you can't serve any alcohol or sell. There's judgment calls as to how many beverages have been sold to an individual and whether you can do that. And so the bars are heavily regulated, but they don't require that you sell food and consumption with it.
okay.
You've heard
But they
of,
could sell wings or whatever. I wanted to stay on this. I wanted to clarify that just because I want to stay another question and then just a point. The state code, and I know they look at the entire population of the state, but do they allow 1 bar license per 20,000 residents? Is that what they allow?
states is lower than that.
The states is lower than that. But our current code, our current antiquated code
Yeah.
allows 1 bar license per 20,000 residents.
That's the interpretation of our code currently.
That's how we're interpreting it.
I just told you, I don't think it allows any bars
As
because
we,
it's beer only, but yeah, the interpretation is population
Okay.
over 20,000 right now.
So the other
I
thing,
want to stay on this for just a sec.
Mhm.
So if we migrate to update our code to match state statute with definitions, with classes of licenses, as we look at the quotas, I'm really not comfortable getting more than what we currently have adhered to, which is 1 bar license per 20,000. I'm not inclined to reduce that quota. I'm happy to see us align with Utah code, update definitions, update classes, but I'm not inclined to make that population quota any less than what it currently is. I'm comfortable with where we are in that portion of the way we're interpreting our code.
Sure.
and I would disagree. I think it should be lower, but that's all right. We can all disagree and
Yeah. and-
decide the best. But the reason why I have a problem with it is because we have a non-working bar that has the license. So why can someone hold that hostage for our city?
I would like to hear Thad talk to
So
that.
I'd like to see if we
Yeah.
can put some stipulations that if it's not running for 3 or 6 months, that you void your license and it goes back to the city and they can distribute it out to someone else.
So I think quotas are a little deceiving in their security. Because your population will increase. And if all you have is a quota of population over 20,000 and you grow to 40,000, automatically another license triggers that can go within any commercial zone. And so I think a council can have more influence by saying, look, we would be okay with somebody applying for one license in these areas. And it could be 3 areas, it could be 7 areas, it could be whatever the council wants. The council then can dictate where they go and also apply a quota element to it, you know, so here's 5 areas, but once we've got 3, the others are closed, right? And so I think the council can, if you can get away from the feeling of security of a quota, you can actually have more input as to your community and what comes into where, than if you just adopted a quota that, you know, had a number to it. Because the challenge is once you grow, let's say you grew to 60,000. Now you've got a third one that can apply in any commercial zone that
Well, in
qualifies.
light of that, I appreciate that. In light of that, let me just clarify. I'm not inclined to increase the proportion of bars to residents. So if there's a better way to do that than a quota, then I'm open to consider that, but I'm not inclined to
So for
to
example,
reduce that quota to increase the number of bars. Partly because I feel like in our restaurant establishments, you can order alcoholic beverages, but they're primarily a restaurant. 70% of their sales is food related, and the other can be, you know, beer and liquor or whatever it may be.
so the council could say, we would permit an application for these 3 areas. And let's say one of them is the one that's currently got a license, at least identified in there, whether it's operational. And then you identify 2 others. As long as the population over 20,000 quota is never exceeded, and you could grow to 150,000 and still only allow 3. So now you're much less, you're far more strict than population over 20,000, right? But you may have taken a more proactive, influential approach to how your community develops by doing so. My message tonight is you can do it how you want, how you think is best applicable, but don't let a high quota give you too much security, because the minute you grow beyond that, somebody has a right to come and apply for a liquor license in any zone that has commercial attached, and that could be next to your laundromat.
What do you call that then? A quota with a zonal?
So if you go to the next slide, Steve, St. George is a good example. St. George kept their quotas. So first of all, they did what most of you have suggested, which is let's just adopt the state's definitions so that as they change, we stay current. They then have quotas, as you'll see there, off premises bars. In other words, so that's where you can buy the beverage and drink off site. Population over 1,000. So there's not a lot of restriction there because that's a fairly low quota. On premises bars, they said no new permits. Now that's partly because it's looking at an old state code. You've got just the new bar that's population over 20. They got bars and hotels population in 20 and bars and retail population over 20. But then you see bar and arts district overlay, 2 licenses. And that's where St. George they did a hybrid. They have a quota that those quotas will keep changing with population growth. But they also said we'll allow 2 within our arts district. And to me, this city could look at the overlay concept, then look at your future and the areas and say, you know, we think we would entertain one in this area, one in that area, and one in that area, but none never exceeding whatever you dictate. And then St. George also just adopts the state's license classes. And so I'm not saying you do it St. George's way, but I think the overlay concept allows a council to be a lot more tailored to their city, as well as specific as to, you know, what type of applications you would like to see and in what areas.
So is this 2 additional license on top of the bar and hotel?
Correct.
So they just said, hey, we want to have 2 other licenses in this arts district.
And so if St. George were to become 200,000 population, you can see that they would allow up to 10 bars under their just quota system. And then they've got their overlay in the arts. And so you can tailor it to your city in a way that I think is more interesting than a security of just kind of a high quota, because I think you're going to outgrow those quotas. And the minute you outgrow that quota, somebody gets to apply for that license in any commercial zone. And we have a lot of commercial zones in places that I think this council doesn't want an alcohol establishment.
So as far as the commercial zones, would it start at C2?
I think you're even lower than C2 on a bar facility.
Okay.
Yeah. And so there's a lot to kind of talk about, and it's probably more work session discussions to try and decide what this council wants its code to look like. My suggestion would be, let's move in the direction of what's been suggested and what St. George has done, which is adopt state definitions. Let's not try and create our own for the city. And then we need to craft the solution for what this council wants for its city, whether it's just a straight quota, and then zoning will determine what comes when the population reaches certain levels, or whether it's more tailored approach of, these are areas we think would be suitable, and this is the total limit that we would ever want.
I'm probably inclined on the latter.
I like the latter. I don't know if that's obvious from my presentation, but I think it allows just a lot more influence over how your city develops. Any questions on that, or any more discussion points? If there's any guidance for me as we work on this, that'll also, be very much appreciated. I'm open to hear that.
I like the overlay that you presented. I don't know if I have no idea what those areas are, but I like that concept.
Yeah, I think that we can say to begin the conversation of those areas is it has to be a commercial zone,
Yeah.
right? And so that's the beginning point, but I'm not suggesting that's the ending point. I think the council will have really good input as to which of
In my
those.
mind, where I was thinking is first off, exit 13 with that new development coming, we might get some restaurants that, like the applicant that came and presented, that he is classified more of a bar than a restaurant, just the way his business is ran.
Just doesn't sell enough food.
It
is
just
really the
doesn't sell enough
difference. Yeah.
food, but it does sell food. So I'm kind of looking at that saying, does it make sense to have a certain limit on that area? And then, I don't know if there's another restaurant or something. That's where I'm leaning. I don't know where
Yeah.
the rest of the council's leaning, but I'm leaning to,
Well,
I
you
like
get
the overlay.
all of those are,
And one of
they
them
can get
over-
kind of weird because I been told that there's bar locations in town that are operating off more of the restaurant license, but they just require you to buy peanuts with every beverage, or
And
they
there's a,
attach some food to it so that the percentage stays high and they can sell it that way. I don't, and then of course, if you're not regulating that, then it just kind of slips, and then
that's a state regulation.
Yeah.
it is a state regulation, but again,
States-
regulations are only as useful as creative people can work around them.
Yeah, the state's pretty robust on regulating their
Yeah.
alcohol laws. But they're
People
not
abide by
perfect.
them. They're pretty
Yeah.
strict.
Yeah, they're not
They don't want
perfect.
to lose them.
The state makes itself check your ID at its liquor store, for example. When you say that again, the state's liquor store is making itself scan every ID for anybody that comes through, right? And so they try to regulate, but regulation's not perfect. Anything else?
Any other questions or
Okay,
comments?
so I think we need to update our code, and the next conversation is just probably how do we want that to look as far as how it really applies to the city?
So I agree with just abide by state codes on the definitions and the license classes, if that makes it, just to give you some direction on.
So if I started a draft that adopted state definitions, adopted state license classes, but came with kind of a variation of quota / overlay, is that a concept you'd want to see and be able to work
Could you
with?
give, I'm good with that, but I'm just wondering if there's another option that you can think of that's,
So you can be dry, you can choose nothing, but I don't think that's the message I'm hearing.
that's Bundy's choice, but that's not my choice.
That's what I call the Arizona Strip option. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I'm good. I actually liked what you presented and would request that we go that way, but that's.
I think
fine.
that you're gonna have to do a little work to decide if you want to do overlay and which areas fit within that. But I think that work's probably worth it because of the nature of what we're talking about. I think we could just adopt the state's definitions and license types and then apply our own quota for each type. And so let's say the idea of a hotel bar isn't that concerning and we wanted to allow those because they're contained within a hotel where we know mostly travelers. We could apply a different quota to that than we do the other ones. And so within the state's metric, I think you've got options.
Can you also look at what other communities, like maybe the Salt Lake area, not Salt Lake, but like Sandy or something like that is doing as far as their hotel bars or
Yeah,
something
I'll
like
look
that?
at that.
Just to give us a comparable besides St. George.
Yeah. St. George has probably been the most progressive for the southern half of the state. I mean, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
Right? There's not a lot of bars south of Provo.
I know we're wrapping up. I just have one last question. What happens if we do nothing?
I think staying with the code as we've got it, we're going to eventually have problems because our code, essentially every one of our operators is in violation of city code right now. We should at least bring it to where the folks that are operating under licenses that exist have a code that permits them to do what they're doing. require them to dilute on site.
Outside.
Does that become a mixed drink?
I think that's no longer a
Violate the
original
license?
container drink. So we're gonna.
It's suggesting that we just abolish the whole thing.
I think that there may be some contribution, say from development or some of the, just economic development that may have good feedback for this council as to what might make sense where. I don't know why, but every airport I've been through seems to be full of alcohol. So maybe travelers want to be drinking. I don't know, but I know that we've
Stewart
got.
is always people to arrive
I think
inebriated.
it's the
yes.
prices, but I don't know. But maybe it's the fact that you're pretty well contained there. But I know that we've got airport related commercial that might be something that this council or experts think is a good place to say, perhaps an overlay opportunity there makes sense. And so we've got a pretty diverse city. I know that we don't want any bars in the middle of residences or in the middle of places that just don't make any sense. Yeah, and state law already eliminates schools, churches, public facilities. And so state law already regulates all of that. We just need to decide if there's places that might make sense to the council.
Thank
Mayor.
you. No additional questions or comments. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Councilman Bundy, motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, 15-minute break. May 26th. Our meeting is broadcast also on YouTube Live. The link is washingtoncity.org/meetings. Any of you out there would like to participate and watch, you are welcome to. I've asked Councilman Ward if he will offer our invocation and Councilman Staley if he will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Our Father in heaven, we bow our heads before thee at this time, thankful for the beauty of the country that we live in, for the freedoms that we enjoy, and for the wonderful community that we have. We ask for a blessing upon these proceedings, that they may proceed forth orderly, in a respectful manner, and cover the business and serve the people which we represent. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, gentlemen. I'll move to item 1, approval of the agenda.
Mayor, I have one change. We, on our item, Washington City Youth Council presentation, we would like to push that to June 9th, where we will give the oath of office to our new city council members and make that presentation when they are here in chamber.
I was looking forward to that.
I know, 2 weeks,
I think there's also an item we need to drop off.
7B
Do we need to do that at this point?
7B.
Yeah,
and B.
Yeah.
or do we need to make a,
Will you include that in your motion?
And also, Mayor, item 7B, which is a consideration to approve preliminary plat for Solace Coral Canyon, has been tabled. Do we have a date on that, Mayor? Is that in 2 weeks, or do we have a date on that?
Don't we have to make a motion on that to table it? Should we just move it up on the agenda and table it?
You could also just
do it
remove
either
it.
way. We
could just
wanted to just
stand
give people who are here for that item
Let 'em know.
notice that they was going to be not here and they didn't have to listen to anything.
I just
that we
wanted to
wanted.
include the
I
date
understand
on my
that. I
motion.
just-
Let's move it to June
Table.
9th.
9th, Mayor.
A table usually means that you've opened it, so you could just say remove it until a date certain is all you need here.
But let's remove it until our June 9th council meeting.
Second that, Mayor.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Item 3 or item 2, announcements. Any other announcements other than what we were going to do at the city council? Okay. Item 3, declaration of abstentions and conflicts. Any to declare at this time? Item 4, consent agenda is to approve the minutes from the city council meeting of 5/12/2021.
Mayor, I'll make the motion to approve the minutes for 5/12.
Bundy, second.
I have a motion and a second. We will roll call vote.
Staley, aye.
Ward, aye.
Ivy, aye.
Coates, aye.
Bundy, aye.
Thank you. Item 5, appointment, consideration to appoint a Washington City recorder. We would like, and I would like to appoint Tara Pence to be our city recorder effective June 1st. And would like your support in that, and we'll entertain a roll call vote.
I'll
Or
second-
any comments?
I'll
before?
second that motion if necessary, or if not,
Well,
I'll,
that's right.
It's not a motion, it's the mayor's appointment. I think we just need a roll call vote from. the
Bailey, aye.
Ward, aye.
Ivy, aye.
Coates, aye.
Bundy, aye.
All right, Tara, congratulations. You can take a deep breath and we will, we'll swear you in, and we won't swear at you, but we'll swear you in June 1st. Would you like to say anything? No?
If I could, Mayor,
Well, congratulations.
I just wanted to mention that we did visit with some other applicants, and, you know, Tara obviously made it to the top of the rung, and so we appreciate her, but we appreciate the others as well.
Sure.
But we sent an application and had some interest in it, so thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, Tara. Congratulations. Okay, we'll move on to item 6, plat amendment. Consideration to approve a plat amendment for Stamsund Estates preliminary plat located at approximately 300 East Skyview Drive. Applicant Bill Cox.
Thanks, Mayor. I want to just note that it's an amended final plat. Had a
Thank you.
typo on that. Yeah, no problem.
So noted.
The applicant is requesting approval of an amended final plat for the Stamson Estates amended subdivision located at approximately 300 East and Skyview Drive. The reason for the amendment is to create 5 new lots on the southern portion of the original lot 14. These 5 lots are accessible off of Skyview Drive. Staff has reviewed the proposed amended final plat and finds it conforms to the designated zoning for this area. Subdivision also remains in compliance with the subdivision ordinance of the city. The Planning Commission reviewed this request on May 19th, 2021, and unanimously recommend approval of the amended final plat for the Stamson Estates amended subdivision based on the following findings and subject to the following conditions. All of which were the standards, and then 6 was added in, which reads a 6-foot block wall will be built surrounding the 5-lot subdivision. Specifically, the block wall will be built to the northeast and west boundary lines.
So the one of the comments I had is that on the original plat that's to the south, we had a note on the plat that identified that there was some kind of, because of the farm and the cornfield and stuff like that, the proximity to, I'd like to add that note to this plat as well, just to make sure that the residents that buy these lots understand that there is a use that's not traditional. I don't remember exactly what that note was, but it was on the plat for the Samson Estate subdivision.
So my question is, why were these 5 new lots that's being asked for tonight not on the original plat?
I don't think they accounted for them. They're ready to develop them at this time. I don't think there's a specific reason that I'm aware of.
So I'll just jump in there, Councilman. So this was originally the school, and so now they're just adding these on. They had purchased the property from the school to add these 5 lots. And I like your idea, Councilman Coates, to just have that language be consistent on this new phase. If there's any further discussion, if not, I'm happy to
Quick
make the
question,
motion.
if I could, and then I'll go to your question. Just I'm making, I don't want to make an assumption here, but I'm assuming that the area for these lots, just nothing changed with the roads or anything. This is just land that's being reduced out of 14, right?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Okay, I motion that we approve plat amendment for Samson Estates to the preliminary plat located at approximately 300 East Skyview Drive, to amend the plat to create new 5 lots along the southern portion of the original lot 14. And I would like to add the condition that the future plat on these 5 lots, they show verbiage consistent with the other phases that indicate that it is adjacent to farming operations, or however that reads.
Mayor, I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Yes,
Could I just have Councilman Stady maybe amend his motion just slightly, because he was reading off the agenda that said preliminary and it is a final. Sorry, Councilman. I just
Right,
wanted-
that's right. This is a final plat. Yes, to approve the final plat, the amended final plat for Samson Estates. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I'll second that.
sure.
Can you state your name in the mic for the record? Thanks.
Yeah, sorry about that. Bill Cox, I'm the applicant. My question is on the condition that's being added, which I'm great. I have 0 issues with the condition. Our time frame on this has been a little bit unique. You might know that our Mylar has already circulated. We've had people kind of up north and all over who have had to sign it. So our Mylar is signed already. Is this language something?
This language only, it can be handwritten on. It's only, the only language states is that there's a agricultural farm next door
Right.
that does it. What it does is,
We're great with it.
yeah, it's just to let the residents know that there is agricultural and events that happen
Okay.
adjacent, because
Smells and whatever.
smells and loud noises, and
We charge extra for
Yeah,
those smells.
for
So
those.
that's perfect.
You know, and if they're really good on that,
that
They can
smells
ha-
called money.
they can actually plot just that section on that Mylar, but
Okay,
it-
perfect.
as he indicates, it can be just written on.
It can just be written on there. Okay, awesome. Hey, thank you.
You
Sorry.
bet,
sorry
Bill.
for the question.
No worries. I had a motion and a second. We'll do a roll call. vote.
Bundy, aye.
Goat's eye.
IVI.
Ward, I.
Staley, and next time I'm not going to read it because I know that's a final plat, not a preliminary plat.
All right, item 7, preliminary plat. Consideration to approve a preliminary plat for Mangata Townhomes located at the intersection Main Street and Washington Parkway, applicant Wes Davis.
Thanks, Mayor. The applicant is requesting approval of a preliminary plat for the Mangata Townhome subdivision located at Main Street and Washington Parkway. The applicant is proposing 161 townhomes on an area coverage of 22.55 acres. Each dwelling will incorporate 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, and a 2-car garage with a minimum 18-foot wide driveway. The zoning designation at this particular location is Planned Unit Development Residential. The surrounding zoning is open space to the north, R16, and administrative professional to the east, planned community development to the west, and R16 to the south. The parcel was recently rezoned in the Planned Unit Development Residential zoning designation. The proposed subdivision conforms to the approved zoning. The request meets the subdivision requirements and other city ordinances as it relates to this location. And staff has reviewed this request and recommends approval with conditions of the preliminary plat as outlined. The Planning Commission reviewed this request on May 5th, 2021, and unanimously recommend approval of the preliminary plat for the Mangata Townhome subdivision based on the following findings and subject to the following standard conditions.
Any questions or comments?
Mayor, I'll make a motion that we approve the
Can I
preliminary.
ask one question? Sorry, I mean, I
That's
was just
all
kind of trying
I
to.
looked up and no one, that's all right.
I just wanted the council's thoughts on unit 161. It's just kind of hanging out there. And so I wanted to get your collective
161?
feedback on that one. It's
a single unit.
a single one, just kind of,
It's, I don't know.
I don't love it, but
Was it there before on the?
no, but I think
I missed that.
with that setback on the parkway, they adjusted things southward, and so that's a little different than the ones that we saw last time. And I just wanted your guys, the council's take on that to see if you had any strong preferences. It looks
Well, it's not an 8-plex.
or a 7-plex.
So I'm actually not, it doesn't bug me as much because it seems more of it's a small single family, but I mean, I don't think it hurts anything.
But the same size as the others.
Yeah, just not
Yeah.
connected with 7 other buildings.
It's got a little bit of an interesting driveway in there, and it kind of sits there. And I get the fact that they're just trying to use all the space and get the maximum number of units, and I don't have a problem with that. But it does just seem a little inconsistent with the multifamily there.
I take it the little T is just for fire access so that they can
Or
back
backing it, or anybody.
or maybe anybody backing in so they can
Well,
drive out straight or.
with the fault that's there, I mean, that's really why they got pushed to the west is because there's a fault line right in there and they're keeping the homes off it. I think it works.
And and not to nitpick, I actually really like a few things on this. I like the parking, and I like the 50-foot roads. I like the wider roads in here, and I think they've done as good as they've tried to do their best with using the property and the natural elements around there. So it's a good project. I just wanted the rest of your take on 161 before we voted on it. And
So you're suggesting we make them all that way?
all single. That might not go over well.
No, probably not.
He really likes 161. So with that, I'll make a motion that we approve the preliminary plat for Mangata Townhomes located at the intersection of Main Street and Washington Parkway with the findings and conditions provided by staff.
Councilman Bundy, second.
I have a motion and a second. We'll do a roll call vote.
Bundy, aye.
Coates, aye.
IVI.
Ward, I.
Staley,
Thank you. Move on to item 8, public hearing related ordinance/resolution. Item A, public hearing to consider a boundary line adjustment between the city of St. George and Washington City, located between Harvest Lane and Merrill Road. Applicant Property Reserve.
Mayor and council, This is an application we received from Property Reserve requesting a boundary adjustment between the city of St. George and Washington City. It is located near the intersection of Harvest Lane and Merrill Road. On April 28th, the council approved a resolution setting the public hearing date to tonight for consideration to approve this boundary line adjustment. The property proposed for the adjustment is to create a 16.5 foot utility easement containing approximately 0.64 acres. Staff is working with St. George City in order for us to proceed together. At this time, Washington City nor the city of St. George has received any protests to the request. And I have confirmed with Public Works that they are in favor of moving forward with this boundary line adjustment.
Any questions from council?
Mayor, if there's no discussion, I'd make a motion to, oh, I'm sorry. It's
Yeah,
public
that's
hearing.
okay.
I apologize.
No
I saw
worries.
it, I started speaking. Apologize. Sorry.
This is a public hearing. If we have any in the audience that has a question about this or a concern, you're welcome to come up.
If not, Mayor, I motion that we close the public hearing.
Second by Coates.
Motion and second to close the public hearing. Roll call vote.
Staley, aye.
Ward, aye.
Ivy, aye.
Coates, aye.
Bundy, aye.
Thank you. We'll move on to item B, consideration to approve of the ordinance for a boundary line adjustment between City of St. George and Washington City, located between Harvest Lane and Merrill Road. Same applicant.
Go ahead.
Now?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just kidding. I'd make a motion to approve an ordinance for a boundary line adjustment between City of St. George and Washington City, located between Harvest Lane and Merrill Road.
Second by Coates.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Again, roll call vote, please.
Bundy, aye.
Coates, aye.
Ivy, aye.
Ward, aye.
Staley, aye.
Thank you. That is approved. Move on to item C, public hearing to consider adopting the Washington City fiscal year budget for 2021, 2022. Finance Director Brian Brown.
Mayor and council. So we're approaching the final steps of the 21-22 budget. And in your packet, I included the budget document. So do any of you have any questions regarding the budget?
There was a couple of things regarding our parks plan. And I was,
It got updated.
did they? I was just thinking about that this as we were looking here. So what page are those on?
Well, I just looked at the overall on the
Okay.
resolution and noticed the total was down, and that was the one area, right?
Yeah, we moved 6 of the $7 million to next year for the
So that's going to be in fund
additional park.
43. We made that adjustment to.
Say again, sorry.
It's going to be in fund 43 where the adjustment was made after last meeting.
43. And though, did that affect the two, was it the dog park and the pump park?
It was only the pump park.
It was
we made
only
that
the pump
adjustment.
park.
And actually the financing may be in the debt service. So it was probably in, I think it's fund 37 was the debt service. It's either 37 or 38 fund.
So the only change that was made was to the pump park. $7 million total was included. We left $1 million in for this year to get
For design and startup.
design and as far as we can get, and with the understanding that if it goes past that, we can come make an adjustment. The dog park was a discussion, but it has been left in the budget.
So and that is for this current fiscal year?
Yes, starting in July.
Does that funds include redoing the grass on the existing large dog?
Barry can answer that question if he's on. You listening, Barry?
I don't think it's ever
I am. No, the existing that's there would just be maintenance out of our budget.
Out of our maintenance budget?
Yes.
Is there talks about shifting I just heard this once and clarification for me that we're going to shift the larger dogs to the back part that has more in the new part?
Yeah, the large dogs would go to the new area, and then the small dogs would stay in those two sections that we have right now. And that would be that would be the adjustments made.
Any other questions on the budget? This is a public hearing. Tara, were there any comments via email or letter?
We have not received any public comments on this item.
Thank you. How about in the audience?
Mayor and council, my name is Michael Anderson, and I'd like to say that my wife and I are strong proponents of the dog park, and I guess there's 300,000 in the budget. And we'd also like to participate in how that's done.
Sorry, do you mind if I ask you a question? By participating in how it's done, help me understand what you.
The design of it and the layout, yeah. So I think Barry mentioned that the big dogs would go over to the new area, the small dogs. There's been some talk about maybe splitting to a third category of mixed. So you have big and little dogs. So I think there's a lot of ways we can use the land, and certainly I'd love to help participate in that.
What kind of dogs do you have?
Little tiny dogs,
Yeah.
little mutts, yippy ankle biters.
So I'm guessing Barry's just kind of wanting to get the okay from the council that he can work with Mike, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
No problem.
And I would say that's fine personally.
So,
Any-
well, maybe we just ask Barry, I mean, when do we expect to see designs on this? And are we having any open public comment on the designs or the process?
We are working on a conceptual right now for that. We've walked that area and have talked about what's going to go where. So when we get that, I would certainly be glad to meet with, we've done that before, met with the folks that use the dog park. That's a great group. And so we would certainly sit down with them and show them what we've got and listen to any suggestions they have, not a problem.
And I think the council also would love to see an update on that. Maybe that's the, what are we thinking, Jeremy, on that?
Yeah, so we're actually, for our work session on June 9th, we're going to have an update on all the parks and the progress and kind of where we're at on that. So Barry will be here to discuss that.
Is
next
that
council
fair to
meeting.
maybe tell residents who are interested in that to tune in on June 9th? Is that the workshop meeting?
Yes, the workshop.
And then further information can be kind of given out from there as far as how some of these are going to roll out.
Yeah,
That would
absolutely.
be great. Yeah.
And well, this is Barry again. We'll have to see where we're at that point. That's a couple weeks away. I don't know if we'll have that conceptual done all the way for that dog park or not, but certainly we'll have information and updates of when those things would, be scheduled. So.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
good.
No, that would be great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr.
Thank you for your
Anderson.
interest.
Anybody else? Okay, if not, I will entertain a motion to close this public hearing.
So moved, Mayor.
I second the motion.
Motion and a second to close the public hearing. Roll call vote.
Staley, aye.
Ward, aye.
Ivy, aye.
Coates, aye.
Lindy, aye.
Thank you, gentlemen. Item D, consideration to approve a resolution adopting the 2021-22 fiscal year budget.
Mayor, may I ask a question before we,
Sure.
Brian, would you come back up, please? I just had one quick question that I wanted to ask. Can you explain how capital projects affects the budget and what kind of numbers are involved in those with our budget this year? I think a lot of times those are included in the final numbers on the budget, and it can be a little bit misleading if our citizens don't understand what that.
So with how we account for most of the capital projects, we have capital project account or funds. So
But those are included in the total.
yeah, they're
budget.
included in the total budget. So you have your general fund, and then we separate a lot of the capital projects out separately. So like I mentioned, Parks has its own capital projects fund, and that's all pretty much it accounts for is only capital projects. So in the budget, in that parks and like streets, public safety, those all have their own fund. And so all the projects for that year are accounted for in that capital project fund. The only different would be like power, sewer, then they have their own general ledger code or accounting code that they track their funds, because they can operate all that, and all the accounting can be done within their own account for like the power and power, sewer, water and all that.
So if capital projects are in the budget the way they are, then it doesn't mean that we have a much larger city budget. It just means that we may have greater or bigger
Yeah.
capital projects.
That's just because the budget's larger does not mean as the operating expenses are pretty much what we've held those
Thank you. That was
flat
my.
or at 3% above what they were, but the operating's pretty much flat. It's the capital projects that are causing the increase to the budget.
And often, Brian, we've been saving for those for some time, correct?
Well, actually, a lot of times they're funded by impact fees and we have
So
5
we've-
years to spend that
Right.
impact fee money. If we don't, then we have to deal with that issue as well.
And I think it's interesting. I really appreciate the work you do as a finance director, but of the budget, it's just around a quarter of it is the general fund. But I think it's important to remember that as a city, we're also, in addition to the capital projects that Councilman Ivy explained, we're also running the utilities with water and sewer and power and storm drain. And each of those operations are a big component of our overall budget. So I think it's important to note that this budget really, it's got the general fund, it's got the capital projects, but it's also got kind of the nuts and bolts, the operations of what makes a city. And a lot of that's just the utility stuff that we appreciate it when the water comes out of the tap and the lights turn on and when the rain comes that it goes down the storm drains and that our roads are nice and go where we want them to go. But those are all part of a city budget that if we just look at the total, sometimes we could misunderstand that, we're keeping up with our needs, not necessarily our wants.
And the funds you're talking about, the power, the water and all that, those are separate from the general fund.
Enterprise funds.
They're completely separate. And the general funds only includes the operations of basically the attorney, the city manager,
administration,
Police, fire, streets. Let's talk about the important stuff, not just that night.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brian.
Is there any more discussion on that? I'd be happy to make a motion, Mayor, if you're ready for
Yeah,
that.
I'm ready.
I'll make the motion that we approve a resolution adopting the 2021-2022 fiscal year budget in the amount of $97,810,009.
Second by Coates.
I have a motion and a second. Roll call vote.
Staley, aye.
Ward, aye.
Ivy, aye.
Coates, aye.
Bundy, aye.
All right, that is approved. Item E, public hearing to consider the vacation/abandonment of a public easement located approximately 244 East Merrill Road. Applicant Jared Plew. You want to handle that, attorney? I guess.
Yes, I'll handle this one. I wasn't going to be the applicant, but I was hoping the applicant would be here. This is a minor subdivision plat under city code. Minor subdivisions aren't required to come before the council. This one is before the council tonight because it accompanies an easement abandonment. This plat represents the 3 lots that are going to be created out of the existing lot or proposed to be created. Staff's concern was that it would also reflect the location of the easements after they were abandoned. So this one reflects the assumption that council will pass the abandonment that's to follow. And so for that reason, we wanted to bring it through. We thought the council would want to see the plat, would want to be certain that the plat reflects the abandonment. Of course, if you're not going to consider the abandonment, which staff recommends that you do, the plat would of course need to be modified as well to reflect the decision on the easements. And so just a fairly standard 3-lot subdivision out of 1. There is a public street you'll see on the west side of 300 East. And so there are public improvements associated with this development. The applicant's aware of those. Staff has interacted with the applicant. The applicant understands the obligation and the duty to install and pay for public improvements as part of the subdivision. And so staff is recommending that council approve this minor subdivision.
Any questions? Public hearing, anybody in the audience? Tara, were there any emails or sent to you?
We had no public comments on this item either, Mayor.
Thank you. If not seeing any, I'll entertain a motion to close this public hearing unless there's additional questions.
So made, Mayor.
Thank you.
Seconded by Bundy.
Thank you. A motion and a second roll call vote.
Bundy, aye.
Coates, aye.
IDI.
Ward, aye.
Staley, aye.
Item F, consideration to approve an ordinance vacating/abandoning a public easement located approximately 244 East Merrill Road.
Mayor, I'll make the motion that we approve the ordinance vacating and abandoning the public easement located approximately 244 East Merrill Road.
Bundy, second.
I have a motion and a second. Roll call vote again.
Bundy, aye.
Coates, aye.
BI.
Ward, aye.
Staley, aye.
Thank you, gentlemen. Item 9, minor subdivision. Consideration to approve a minor subdivision for the Deer Meadows minor subdivision located approximately 2530 South, 300 East. Applicant Jared and Kara Plew.
Thanks, Mayor. The applicant is requesting approval for the Deer Meadows minor subdivision located at approximately 2530 South, 300 East. The applicant is asking to split the present 3.42 acres into 3 parcels, with parcel 1 being 0.99 acres, parcel 2, 1.76 acres, and parcel 3, 0.51 acres. The proposed minor subdivision is currently zoned residential agriculture half, with Ag 20 to the east, residential agriculture half to the south, and county property to the west and north, which is agriculture 20. Staff has reviewed the request proposal, and the proposed Deer Meadows minor subdivision conforms to the standards as set forth in the zoning regulations and subdivision ordinance of the city. The Planning Commission reviewed this request on May 5th, 2021, and unanimously recommend approval of the Deer Meadows minor subdivision based on the following findings and subject to the following standard conditions. We're happy to answer any questions at this time.
Just curiosity, maybe is the configuration of between lot 1 and lot 2, for example, there's an arc there. Is there any idea of why that's that way? It's just kind of a unique configuration.
I might be able to guess at that because I'm just familiar with it. I think there's a sport court. There's an existing house, and I believe there's a sport court in that area. I could be wrong, but just going off memory.
It's because they want it that way, Councilman Bundy.
Well, the alignment of lot 3 is interesting as well.
But I haven't played on the court, so
No, I'm old fashioned. I love straight lines, square, rectangular.
Yes, there is some existing buildings there that they accommodated.
I think one of the conditions is, of course, the LID requirement, correct?
Any additional questions? I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the minor subdivision for Deer Meadows minor subdivision located at approximately 2530 South, 300 East.
Bundy, second.
I have a motion and a second. We'll do a roll call vote.
Staley, aye.
Ward, aye.
Ivy, aye.
Coates, aye.
Bundy, aye.
Thank you. That is approved. Item 10, ordinances. Item A, continuation of consideration to approve an ordinance adopting zone change request Z-21-08. Request to change the present zone from agricultural 20 acre lot minimum A20 to service commercial C2 located at approximately 3650 South Washington Fields Road. Applicant Neil Walter.
Thank you, Mayor. This item, as you know, was tabled 2 weeks ago, and that was following the 2-week holdover being completed. This allowed for more discussion, specifically to consider of modifying the zone change request to a planned unit development commercial designation. The applicant was asked to create a list of permitted uses as well as conditional uses they wish to be considered as part of that possible zone change approval to go with that PUDC. New exhibits relating to that request were handed out to you. And again, I apologize for the lateness. But again, all the ones that were on the left-hand side are the conditions and permitted uses in your current C2 zoning, and everything on that right column at the back of my report is all the things they're wishing to carry over into that. Some things were left off. I know you haven't had much time on that, but those are, if you want to just briefly read through those conditions that or the permitted uses they want on that one column on the right-hand side.
Drew, maybe I'll just kick off with one that came to mind. I like the tables. I like the way that they presented this with current, C2 uses and then their proposed uses. I think that's pretty clean to read. I think I'm understanding this right, that if this item is not carried to the right into the other column, then they're not asking for it. And I see the applicant nodding that that's right. Just two quick questions. I don't know that I love storage units right there. That would be one that I might just ask you to reconsider if you could. And then the other one that I didn't understand, and this might be a question for staff, is toward the bottom, it talks about retail and or wholesale. And then at the last sentence on the proposed snow property use, the last line or two lines say display outside an enclosed building, including personal services. I just didn't know exactly what that meant. I'm kind of at the bottom of page 2 of the handout. I just didn't know exactly what that meant.
I think I'll invite Neil up on that if I can, Council, because that's one that they kind of added on because there's nothing to the left-hand side of the column. So Neil, could you clarify that one maybe?
Yeah, so personal services are things like, nail salon, hairdresser, those spa, right? The things that are.
I have 3 daughters.
Okay, you get it. So anyway, that was the way we chose to describe it. I'm not sure that it was perfect, but so, and I did, okay, thank you.
Well, I don't have any daughters, so go ahead.
Sorry, Neil Walter. And I want to just clarify, Councilmember Staley did ask if the blanks were indeed omitted, and the answer is yes. At the last meeting, the council asked us to consider removing some of the uses, and so we went through and and to be mobile food vendor is kind of an interesting one. You've got mobile food vendor in AP, C1 and C2, so it was redundant. Yeah, so mobile food vendor stayed just because we just didn't repeat it multiple times. But right now, mobile food vendor is approved in your AP, C1 and C2.
Oh, I see that. Okay.
Yeah, we just didn't repeat it, but we did take out
cemetery.
We took out cemetery, we took out churches. We took out the one accessory apartment attached to and on the same parcel as approved retail use.
State liquor store.
Yep. Yeah. So, and I did also hear your request about storage units, and we understand that. We understand.
How do you feel about that? Are you comfortable removing that?
I think that I'd like to consider if there are any other requests, and then I think we could consider all of them together.
So the 2 that I had was the repair service on the C1. Retail operation and cleaning, laundry, cosmetic and repair service. I'd like to I don't really want repair service there.
Even if it's inside a wholly enclosed building?
Well, I kind of had the same thing. And so, yes, because what happens with a lot of those repair services is the parking for the yet to be repaired ends up outside. So even though the services are inside, there's a lot of parking. I'm not personally, and I kind of jumped in on his comment, but I had the same one.
He answered it
I'm not
better than me,
opposed to
though.
it, but I want it to come back to the council if that's what happens. So I would like it removed from this. So it's not a blanket. Give me, if you want to sell to that and you want to put it in there, it should come back before the council in the PUD process. Sorry, Councilman, if you wanted to.
No, I appreciate your comments. So, and
Councilman, you're talking as if you think this is automobile repair. Is that correct?
That's what I'm thinking.
Because there's automobile repair in a different place.
What,
there's
what
repair,
repairs this?
there's-
It says
they're in a few
repair
places.
services. Because if it's like computer
Well-
repair, that's totally different.
That might be your question that you should be asking the applicant first.
Okay,
Because
what kind of-
automobile is on the next page. You'll see there, the third category down on the second page includes automobile service stations. And then it excludes repairing.
Okay, so what kind of repair is this? Because that's not, I mean, it's, how do you tell the difference between them?
Well, that's what I think you need to have clarified from the applicant so that you can consider it.
Okay, what are you considering here on this line item under C1 under repair services?
Because you'll see on page 2, repairing is excluded from that request.
Are these pages numbered?
I was gonna say, I don't have the same exhibit, so I'm not sure if I'm following. I do note that there is,
I have the packet that was handed to me with these.
yeah, so, and that's okay. Mine's not laid out quite the same, but that's okay.
Pagination might be different, yeah.
So there's a section that says repair, renovating, painting and cleaning of goods, vehicles, merchandise and equipment, where all operations are conducted entirely within a fully enclosed building. You see that one?
Yeah, I see
Okay.
that one.
And then the one below that is and then there's another one that is retail or wholesale sell of goods, equipment, merchandise, et cetera. That's all in an enclosed building. Your specific concern is vehicles in the provision on repairing, renovating, painting and cleaning of goods, vehicles, merchandise. Because,
Yes.
for example,
Mine is
computer
not.
repair-
Not necessarily. I mean, the repairing, renovating and painting and cleaning. I would like to see that come back before the council for an approval of all of those items.
So even iPhones.
Well, again, I don't want to dig. I don't think it's beneficial to us to kind of go down through like iPhones are okay. This is not. I would just assume say those types of repair facilities. If you're going to sell to them, bring it back to us. But I guess if you want to make a different, if you want to try some language that I could bite off on, probably iPhones wouldn't be a problem for me. But you know, even if you're painting iPhones, I don't know. You're starting to get into chemicals. You're starting to. I'd like to better understand that it's too open for me.
And I respect that and I understand that. I just would at least note that in the C2, it is currently a permitted, it's not a conditional use. And that's why we included it. It wasn't something we were trying to add. It was something.
Well, and
that
it was,
currently
if you'll
is.
remember in the conversation, that this was one of the items that I specifically mentioned was the repair. That was one of the stretches for me on the C2 zoning.
Are there any other ones?
Mr. Walter, on the same line, in your C1 categories, the third C1 category where you've written, and again, I just want the council to get clarity on this. It says retail operation of cleaning, laundry, cosmetic and repair services. I think we just might want whatever clarity is coming out of this discussion to include that repair services reference also.
So what was your intention on that repair service? Because that's what caught my eye.
That one is, we just literally copied it word for word from the C1 zone.
But what's your opinion of what that is?
Honestly, I'm not going to be able to make that interpretation, right? Because when we come and request a use and then you're issuing when you're trying to issue, for example, a building permit or a business license, you're going to have to interpret that. We literally copied it over from the existing code, and I'm certain that there's some precedent within the city about how that's being interpreted.
So I would ask Drew or someone if they know the interpretation of that, because it's unclear to me on what that is. It's sounding like it's like a computer repair store or something like that, but I just need clarity on what that is.
That one is a bit ambiguous. I'd probably, because I'm going to, go back with the words that are clustered with it, would be more of a small repair. I would, think of a clock repairman. I would think of, maybe an electronics repairman. Maybe even like the Mr. Appliance here, where they fix washer and dryers because we have cleaning and laundry in that same sentence. So, it'd probably be okay with a guy repairing your refrigerator, your washer, your dryer. In that category. Would I go as far to say that's going to be a diesel shop? No, I don't think so. Even a vehicle, I probably wouldn't say that particular one would fall under vehicle, or else they probably would have put vehicle on that particular things. So again, more small repair, electronic, things like that, home items, et cetera. That would be how I would interpret that if someone brought that one to me. So.
So does that clear it up?
I think so. I think that my interpretation is the same as Drew's. You know, sewing machine repairs. I'm comfortable saying that this C1 category does not contemplate vehicle repair. And if the council would indicate to the applicant that they're okay with the smaller types of repairs that have been listed, I think that would be helpful to the applicant.
So going back to what Councilman Ward stated on, he would like to see these come back. Is that something we would just scratch from the list and everything's open to come back at a PCD? Because in my opinion, it is. If you want something different than what's on this
Correct.
list, you can still apply for a
Sure.
PD commercial and apply for whatever, but these are the ones that we've already granted. Does that make sense?
It makes very good sense.
So I look at
You're
this,
concerned with repair services. You'd like to strike the repair from the
repair, renovating,
yeah.
cleaning and goods,
yeah.
vehicle, merchandise and equipment where all operations and conducted entirely within a fully enclosed building. Just scratch that one from this list. And if they want, they can apply for it. And if it's a good plan and it makes sense, it doesn't mean it won't be denied. It's not an already permitted use.
Yeah, you can essentially treat it like a conditional use, but require that use come before the council, not the planning commission. That'll be a different there. So you can give it that type of provisional treatment.
So I've noted Councilmember Staley's request regarding storage units, and I've noted Councilmember Coates' request regarding repairing, renovating, painting, and cleaning of goods, vehicles, merchandise, and equipment were that whole section, right?
Yeah, that whole
Okay.
section. And
Yep.
the other one that I had was motor vehicle, trailer, campers, and recreational vehicle sales. I think that's more of an auto industry. I don't know if it's appropriate for down there. I'm not saying it's not.
Where are you at?
It's on this, it's on the very bottom. It's motor
Section
vehicle.
from the bottom.
Yeah. Motor vehicle, trailer, campers, and recreational vehicle sales. I don't think that's an appropriate corner for trailer sales or motor vehicle sales or auto sales. We have other areas in our town that are. So. It's conditional. It doesn't mean they can't apply for it at a later date, but I don't want to grant it at this time without.
I
seeing
had that
it.
one scratched off on mine as well. The other one that I would add is your AP. You've got an AP that says public utility service and maintenance facilities. I would scratch maintenance facilities. I think we already talked about the C1 repair service, the one just below that.
Isn't that for city though?
It doesn't say that there.
Well, it's just a public utility service, so I guess.
Service and maintenance facilities. But if it was, so even if it was a maintenance facility for the city, I'd still would want it to come back and say, this is the use, this is what it's going to be.
Technically, if it was for the city, you wouldn't have to go through this process.
That's right.
Unless you want to be really stringent on yourselves.
Because you are the zoning authority.
Well, yeah. I don't know if you're going to rent it to the, I don't know. I mean, that's where my mind's at with that.
I understand. Again, we looked at it, it was part of the AP, which is your lowest impact commercial zone. We thought there was probably some purpose for why it was there in the first place, and we included it. But I noted.
I think that category is clearly about a public utility. Maybe the one link, we've got what I would call a utility service facility nearby our Nyson Park. I think it's Questar or something, has some facilities there. A really, really, really rare exception that probably wouldn't be proposed on, prime retail space, but that's
Yeah,
probably
and
what's
I'll-
contemplated here.
And I'll just note, I actually don't have an issue removing that one, because if the city felt like that there was a need for a public utility use there, you could make that determination at any time, and it wouldn't be a conflict. So but my guess is that the reason why you're bringing it up is because you're not envisioning that it would be, but if that ever changed in the future, you'd have the ability to handle that without concern.
The other one is also in the C2, hotel and motel. I would scratch that off. beyond what's been asked for by the other council members, that's my list.
Thank you, Councilmember Ward.
I do have a question. This is probably for Drew, but about midway down on the first page, it indicates parking lots for approved principal uses. So those are parking lots for whatever business comes in, right? That's just for the principal use is whatever is approved there.
Yes.
That's what that parking.
Yeah, and that's kind of redundant thing to put in there because you require parking, but I think we just put it in so nobody would question saying, hey, I don't, if they wanted to, combine all the parking into one area and use it as a shared thing, I think that's why we put it that way. So, but it's specifically for the uses of the businesses on the site.
Okay.
My comment is just for clarification for our citizens that may be listening at home, and that is in one of these categories, it says commercial recreation and entertainment facilities, not to include sexually oriented businesses. So those are already precluded, just in case somebody's listening and wondering why we're not mentioning that.
Thank you, Representative Ivy.
How is this? Is this, are we close here? Does some of these put you over the edge?
So I think that if I'm looking at it, let me just state what I understand. And I think that actually, Councilmember Ward, I think we're very close. So the request was to remove public utility service and maintenance facilities. That was noted, and I don't.
Actually, just the maintenance facilities of that portion.
Okay. No, I don't have a concern with that. Retail operation of cleaning, laundry, cosmetic, and repair services. I think the intent was to leave that one or just remove
It got
repair.
clarified of what type of repair service that was, which is an example of a indoor sewing phone.
So are you okay?
I'm
Are you
okay
okay
with
with that
leaving
one?
that one now
Okay.
that it's been clarified.
I personally, because it's not very clear in the code, I personally would like to scratch it, just the repair portion. And then if something comes in, I guess if it was sewing machines, what do you say? Smaller than a bread box? How do you do that?
Well, I agree. It's kind of vague, but what wasn't vague was that in C2, it jumped right to vehicle maintenance. And those are the ones I'm concerned about. I'm not concerned about any repair that's inside a building that's like
it's a small modular nuclear.
Yeah, I'm all right with that. If you're all right with it.
We're getting one of those.
No,
built anyway.
I mean, I understand, but
and again,
that's not small. That's a totally different use.
Well, I'm just throwing it out there because there are examples of that. I mean, like even small engine repair. Some of those facilities, even though the repair all happens inside, they scatter out. The back lot is kind of full of stuff. There's other issues there. Sewing machines don't have.
We're saying all vehicle repair though. And nothing can be outside.
But a rototiller is not a vehicle. It's a gardening implement. So that's why I just think you get into a range there that I'm not prepared to delineate. So it's easier for me to just scratch it. But
if we left the balance of it, Councilmember, I'd be fine just to strike repair services. I don't mind that. And I understand that there may be somebody that has a need for that particular use. And the way that I see it right now, the current C1 permitted use is subjective at the city. And I think that this is going to be treated the same way. So if I'm kind of moving on down, Councilmember Coates, can I just get some clarification? Are you proposing to strike the entire section of repairing, renovating, painting, and cleaning of goods, vehicles, merchandise, that whole section, or just the vehicles portion?
Oh, the whole section.
Okay.
Because I think it goes with the vehicle. It's all together, renovating, painting. We don't want a painting industry that goes in there and works outside and like has storage in the back. And that's something I'd like to see presented.
And at least the way that we had envisioned it, that would be prohibited because it has to be inside, but that's why I'm asking for clarification.
I'm the same way. Strike the whole thing because when you get into a paint shop, you're tending to pump the fumes outside. You're taking special measures to do most of those. So
and then I've got hotel, motel, motor vehicle, trailer sales, storage units.
That's what I see.
Okay. So we did take some of these out. We put a lot of thought and consideration into what we've proposed, but I'm agreeable to those adjustments.
And it doesn't mean you can't come back with.
We understand
the applicant, because that's the good thing about the PD commercial is you can come back and apply for it. It's just these are the things that we're saying we're comfortable with today without a plan in front of us.
yeah, again, I'll repeat that with those clarifications, we're agreeable to those modifications.
Thank you, Neil. Any additional questions, comments? I'd entertain a motion.
Mayor, I'll make a motion that we approve the ordinance zone change request Z-21-08 to a requested change from present zone agricultural 20-acre lots to a PD commercial with the applicant's request to move that with the items outlined for approval on the list provided to us, striking the following items. Public utility service and maintenance facilities. On the next one would be under a C1, which is just remove the repair service out of that line. Striking on the C2, repairing, renovating, painting, and cleaning of goods, vehicles, merchandise, and equipment where all operations and conduct entirely within a fully enclosed building. And then striking the hotel, motel, striking motor vehicle, trailer, campers, and recreation vehicle cells and storage units. All those items on storage units.
Councilman Bundy, second.
Have a motion and a second. We'll do a roll call vote.
Staley, aye. Ward, aye. Ivy, aye.
Coates, aye.
Bundy, aye.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to item B, continuation of consideration to approve an ordinance adopting general plan amendment request G-2102, request to change the land use designation from very low density to medium high density, located approximately 500 east, 3650 south. Same applicant, Neil Walter.
Thank you, Mayor. As stated, this item was also tabled after the 2-week holdover, allowing for more discussion relating to the other applications that are all tied to this with the Snow family. Just for, purposes, I'm not sure where this was going, but they have brought another exhibit that I've given you on the back of that report I shared with you earlier of maybe a proposal and a new consideration. I'm on the medium high, unless there's those of you who want to still vote the medium high density through, but if not, the family has agreed to maybe consider changing both these two areas of your general plan to all low density residential. And they've kind of given you, they had their engineer lay out a kind of an idea of a subdivision that would fit within that area, noting that they will still leave the trail easement in there, which is not part on the canal. It would still be on the other side. They would still put that along the back side of a landscape and trail easement. So that's kind of what they're bringing before you tonight to consider maybe as well. But again, their application is for the medium high density, but this could be an alternative for them.
So Drew, just to clarify, this is just an option. It doesn't mean they have to propose this in the future. They can propose something else, but it does conform with what they're asking on the low density.
Right. Well, what they would want is the low density. And as you see on here, that probably have to come back with an R110, which is in the low density. And then, you wouldn't be approving this layout by any means. This is just to give you an idea of what they propose could happen there if those two pieces under this general plan, this one and the next one, were granted the low density, that this would be kind of a layout that would fit in that designation.
So I'd like to hear from the applicant that they're good with changing this to low density on their application.
Neil Walter, representing the applicant. Thank you, Councilmember Coates. We did significantly consider the feedback from both the public hearing and the discussion at the last meeting. And I'll just note that in the public hearing, there were no objections to the low density proposal. There were a lot of concerns about the medium high density proposal. And they were from both the public comments and from council. So over the last 2 weeks, we considered whether or not we would be willing to do that. And in fact, the answer to your question is, Councilmember Coates, yes. We are willing to propose the low density general plan amendment. I just want to reiterate that we're not proposing an actual plat or a zone change at this point. We haven't gone through that proper protocol, but we did feel like it would be important and helpful to see at least conceptually what we're looking at with this low density general plan amendment. And I also probably should note, and Drew can clarify, that we're proposing, we had two applications, one for the 9 acres that was medium high density, and then an adjacent parcel that was low density. We're proposing the same for both. So I don't know if that means that you want to handle those two items, however that gets handled, but that's what we're proposing.
We'll have to, because it's two different items on this agenda, we'll have to do it as two different items, but on the net, if this carries through, then you can definitely combine them into one moving forward.
Thank you. Any other questions?
So I don't know if I have a question or just a comment. And I have to truly say that this agenda item has caused me a lot of consideration. I've thought about it forward and backwards, and I felt like that in me looking into it a little bit, I realized that the general plan is a reflection of the community and our values. And it also is a means that our citizenry can base their decisions on a plan, and they can build their homes accordingly to understand what that plan would look like. Now, I do know that the general plan can be amended, but whenever you do amend the general plan, there's some considerations that you have to consider. And one of them is, does it maintain or improve the quality of life of the citizens in Washington? Does it promote the general welfare of the community? Is it in the best interest of the city? And whereas I know that you'll build a terrific product, I have no question, but my feelings are, to change a general plan, I need more compelling factors than to increase densities, which it relates to profitability, and I understand that, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I am not speaking for the council, I'm strictly speaking for myself. But the general plan to me is something that our citizens, if they were to buy a home out there in the last several years, since 2017, they'd go to the general plan, they would see what this was to look like. So in consideration of that, I appreciate the concession on the general plan to go to low density, but I've even considered the canal easement being a nice buffer between the commercial and the zoning. So just want you to know, in full disclosure, that I probably would be comfortable with the very low density for the area that we had discussed, and the low density with a concession from the medium high. But of course, I'm just one of 5 here, but I just wanted you to know we've been open about this. We've shared some very candid conversation. I just wanted you to know where I was at.
Thank you, Councilmember Ivy. Appreciate that. If I may just comment, I do know that there were a number of concerned citizens, both at the Planning Commission and at the City Council, who spoke to the low density. And many of them were people who have moved into the subdivision immediately to the south. And I just at least want to remind council that none of them had any objections to our low density proposal. In fact, most of the comments were in support of that particular application. So, and I appreciate your comments, Councilmember Ivy.
Any additional comments or questions? Anybody prepared to make a motion?
Mayor, I'll make a motion that we approve the ordinance adopting general plan amendment request G-2102 to change the land use from very low density to low density at approximately 500 east and 3650 south.
Bundy, second.
I have a motion and a second. We'll do a roll call vote.
Bundy, aye.
Votes aye.
Ivy, nay.
Ward, aye.
Staley, aye.
All right, that is approved. We'll move on to item C, continuation of consideration to approve an ordinance general plan amendment request Z-21-03, request to change the land use designation from very low to low, located approximately 500 east, 3650 south. Applicant Neil Walter again.
Well, Mayor, I'll keep this short. I think we already had a lot of the discussion. Neil, go ahead, hop up there. By the time you get there, I'm just going to say
I was just going to say no additional comment. I think that we covered it in the last one. Thank you, Drew.
So I'll make some comment on this one. Generally speaking, this is a funny word to use when I say that I support the general plan. I understand going from very low density to low density as a buffer between the commercial and some residential, but at this point, I look at this very low density and I look to the north and it's very low density, already zoned that way. I look to the west, it's very low density. I look to the south, it's very low density. So 3 of the 4 sides on this are very low density. And in this particular case, I'm not comfortable amending the general plan to allow for higher density on this particular piece. I understand that I was willing to make some concessions on this in the centerpiece, but not in this piece.
Any additional comments?
If there's no other comment, I'll motion that we deny an ordinance to amend the general plan request G-21-08, which is a request to change the land use designation from very low density to low density.
Just to clarify, Councilman Saleh, you said G-21-08.
Is that the right one?
I think you meant 03.
On item C.
Mayor, can I borrow your glasses? I've been holding out on this. And those daughters at home have teased me about it. There we go. Oh, yes. G-21-03. So that's the property located at 500 East 3650 South. So I motion to deny that general plan amendment.
Mayor, I'll second that motion.
All right, I do have a motion and a second. We'll do a roll call vote.
Staley, aye.
Ward, aye.
The motion is to deny. IVI.
Coates, nay.
Bundy, nay.
Okay, that is approved 3-2. To deny. Move on to item D, consideration to approve an ordinance for zone change request Z-21-10. Request from residential agricultural 1 acre minimum lots, RA1, to single family residential 15,000 square foot lots, R-1-15, located approximately 300 West Sycamore Lane. Applicant Jed Christensen.
Thank you, Mayor. 2-week holdover is complete. Items ready for the council action. Just to remind you, the Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of Z-21-10 for the zone change request from the residential agricultural 1 acre minimum and the use of the bonus density to a proposed single-family residential 15,000 square foot R115 zoning designation on view of the city council. And I'll be glad to answer any questions during your 2-week thought on this.
Mayor, if there's no questions, I'll make a motion that we approve the zone change request Z-21-10 from residential agricultural 1 acre minimum to single family residential 15,000 square foot lots R115.
Mayor, I'd be happy to second that motion also.
I have a motion and a second. Roll call vote.
Bundy, aye.
Coates, aye.
IVI.
Ward, aye.
Staley, aye.
All right, thank you. Item 11, that passes. A resolution, consideration to approve a resolution to move forward with a request for a boundary adjustment between Washington City, City of St. George, located approximately 4430 South Crimson Cliffs Way.
Mayor and
Please
council.
record.
Yes, staff has received another application for a boundary line adjustment between Washington City and St. George City by Desert Investment Group LLC. The property proposed for adjustment is to move the boundary of the street into St. George City. They will be taking possession of the entire portion of that road as well as curb gutter and sidewalk. Staff has been in contact with the City of St. George. Both municipalities will proceed together. Public Works is also aware of this request and they are in favor of moving forward. And as you're aware from our previous request, the resolution is basically just accepting this petition and then will allow us time to post and begin the process for the boundary line adjustment.
And does it make better sense for it to go into St. George than Washington?
If you'll see on that north portion of the boundary there, that little tiny triangle, that is in St. George City, and the remainder of, or that's in Washington City, and that giant parcel there is in St. George. So they've asked to just move the entire portion of the road there so they can take that little piece in to do their subdivision development. And in doing so, they'll just take the remainder of the road rather than us having half of the responsibility for maintenance.
I think it's fair to say that it makes sense that Washington City not own a slice of that road at that location, that it makes sense for one municipality to own the whole road.
I think Mike could figure out how to pave a slice.
We slurried a few slices this week in a few places.
Any additional questions or comments? I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I'll approve the resolution to move forward with the request of a boundary adjustment between Washington City and St. George City located approximately 4430 South Crimson Cliff Way.
Bundy,
Board-
second.
I have a motion and a second. We'll go roll call vote.
Maybe
NDI.
before
Votes
the
aye.
vote, Mayor,
Sure.
this is a small technicality. I think I know where the council is going to vote, but there's really two issues at play here. The first is responsibility for the roadway, which I think was obvious. The benefit that you're giving up by your vote is cities do report to the state the distance of roadways that they maintain, and there is funding connected to how many miles of roads that you maintain. And so this would be Washington City giving up a small portion of their total roadway. It's not enough to be significant, but that would be the detriment that your vote would give up today.
Thank you for that. And I still vote aye.
Bundy, aye.
Roll call vote.
Majority vote.
Yeah.
Ivy, aye.
Ward eye.
Staley, aye.
Thank you. That's approved. Item 12, agreements, consideration to approve an impact fee deferral agreement for Red Slopes Soccer.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank
we'll
you.
let the city manager lead out.
Thank you, Mayor. I think everybody might remember, some who weren't able to come to our council meetings at the time, probably weren't in attendance when we talked about this last time. It's been 4 or 5 months. But if you remember, Red Slopes Soccer came to the city, and they're planning to build a soccer complex in the Stookie Farms area. And I think we had a work session on this, but like I said, it's been quite a while. So the agreement in front of you is an impact fee deferral agreement. If you remember, we did a traffic study and impact fee study for streets, and then the study was redone and adjusted again. And then our prior economic development director, Matt Liu, worked with Dave Hubbard, who's here representing Red Slope Soccer, on this deferral agreement. So in essence, you have the ability to adjust the impact fee at the time it's charged to respond to unusual circumstances in specific cases. That's how the code reads. So that's sort of the justification for allowing such an agreement. And I hope that you've read through this. The meat of the agreement really is in Exhibit B. It's the very last page. Exhibit B shows the initial impact fee payment will be $209,860.80 at the date the building permit is issued, with 4 years worth of additional impact fee payments after that. So each year on the anniversary date, $125,000 would be due in impact fee deferral. Now, there's some special considerations and conditions, and you can see there's scenario 1 and scenario 2 here, where if enough, what is referred to in the document as team days are reached, meaning enough teams come and participate in tournaments at the soccer field, then those impact fee amounts could be mitigated. So you see here, the first year the complex opens, and all 4 years, really 1,820 team days would mitigate the entire cost of that deferred impact fee. And all of this is based on the economic impact analysis that was done. I mean, essentially the thought here is that we're gaining an amenity that's important for the community, and it's an amenity that some other communities, would pay greatly for to put in themselves. We've done something similar with Sullivan Soccer Park. In this case, it would be a private facility, but we would not build it, maintain it, water it, all those kind of things. I think the water is probably one more thing that I would bring up that's in the agreement, that the water would not, to water the fields, would not come from Washington City, but would come from private sources, underground wells that are located in the Stuckey Farms area. And that's really the discussion laid out. I think if Dave would want to make any comments or you have any questions, we can certainly try to answer them.
You have any questions for Dave?
I guess the question with respect to the water is, have you got water secured that you wouldn't need to use the city's culinary water, which we're saying you wouldn't be able to, but I'm just curious about arrangements you've made for water.
Yeah, the agreement that we are working out with Carl Larson, who owns Stuckey Farms, is to use a portion of his acre feet of water to provide irrigation for the fields. If we did not do this, he would have to beautify the land anyways, and you'd have to water it. So whether it's under his auspices or ours, it's really a net zero.
It's my understanding that that water is brackish in nature, and it would take a lot of treatment to put that into any culinary water as well.
Well, we're not going to use it for culinary water. We'll take culinary water from Washington City. This will just be irrigation, and we'll put the grass in that's consistent.
So I'm still struggling with how this is. I just don't like that we're taking away money from our streets impact when we need those. And I just don't see the fiscal benefit to Washington City, because I think the commercial use is going to go elsewhere because we don't have the commercial down there. I just don't see the numbers. I see that it's going to St. George. It's not going to Washington. So I just have a hard time taking away from our streets department on our roads and our impact off, unless you can prove to me at least how that benefits just Washington City and not the county, which is not a bad thing. But for us to give all the impact fee credit on our end, I just have a hard time going forward without proving that it's for a benefit for Washington City and not for the surrounding area as a whole, because it's all taking away from our residences and our streets to improve our area. So,
well, my understanding is that Washington City is in the midst of growing their commercial sector, retail, hotels, things like that will directly benefit. What we tried to do is we tried to estimate how many people that would come to the complex would come from out of the area, and then how much would be spent within a 15-mile radius, for example. Well, some of that is not in Washington City, but we are anticipating with some of the amenities that are going to be going into Stuckey Farms as well as along the Southern Parkway, that the growth in that area will result in a great deal more of the tax money going directly to Washington City. In addition to that, keep in mind that part of this agreement is that we are giving Washington City rec program 10% of the available time in the fields and in the indoor field house, which is a full-size soccer field, a futsal field, basketball and volleyball courts, etc. And that equates to about 100 hours per week that is available to Washington City at zero cost. And that equates to about $200,000 a year. So while the economic impact may not be at the level that you desire it right now, because some of it's going to leach out into St. George, et cetera, that impact in terms of the facility usage is strictly for Washington City, and we have not accounted for that in the proposal.
no, and I understand that, and I think that's a good thing. The numbers just aren't there for me. Just full disclosure, I struggle with taking away our streets department to help a different department. I just have a hard time with that.
Yeah.
I guess my feelings are that I think by having this in our city, it'd create opportunities that we otherwise might not have. I know that we've have the project we talked about tonight that's going to have commercial in the area. We've got the build out of 3650. There's other commercial property there on Stuckey. And to me, I've had some interaction with another city that had the opportunity to buy in with the county up in Utah County, and spoke with a couple of, actually spoke briefly with the mayor at an event a couple of months ago, and asked what they felt. They're actually paying to that facility $25,000 a year for the foreseeable future, just to maintain now I know that it's apples and oranges, but I feel like it'd be a great opportunity for our city, because I think not only would we use it, then it would heighten the skill level of soccer players in our area by being there. But I think that what you're seeing is there's an accelerated trend in families traveling for sporting events.
Right.
And where we may not have restaurants or motels right there right now, I think that it could serve as the catalyst to make those amenities come about. And so that's my feeling. I think that it would be good for our city. I think it would be a good investment.
Keep in mind also that in addition to just tournaments, which is the only thing that we counted, we're going to be hosting coaching courses. We're going to be inviting international teams to come over. We've offered the facility to, for example, Liverpool Football Club to come over, or Olympic teams that want to come over and train, that type of thing. It just raises the visibility of the area in general. And while, yes, it does have a wide impact, some of that is going to reside in Washington City. And as you develop your commercial base, more and more of that money will stay.
Dave, I wanted to jump in on this conversation, and this isn't this isn't just coming forward tonight. I mean, this has been probably a 2-year discussion.
2.5 years, yes.
2.5 years. And
who's counting?
So
I am.
one of the things that you had mentioned in one of our work sessions is you talked about the after school program.
Yes.
And the way that, I mean, and this isn't it's a new venture here, but you've done this in other places. Can you just speak a little bit to how how that runs and how that impacts the local children who are here? And
It's actually an in-school program. It's not an after-school program. Funding for physical education has been cut throughout the state. And hiring teachers and having classes that directly benefit the physical activities has really kind of taken it in the shorts. Excuse my French. So what we do is that we have designated coaches / teachers that will go into the schools, and they will conduct classes, physical education classes centered around soccer, the rules of the game, sportsmanship, ethics, those types of things that really emphasize, not just the love of the game, but the love of participation, of teamwork, that type of thing. We do that in the schools. We've done that in Salt Lake City, and we've had like 5,000 students that participate in that. We actually have already started that program down here through the 7 Lead Academy, and that is actually in process right now.
excuse me, are you planning on doing an after school program, or like you do in other places too, where the athletes, the students can?
Yeah, well, the after school program can be melded in with the rec program, which is part of the 10% designated time that we offered to Washington City.
Let me just ask a couple other questions. So how many fields are you looking at a total build out?
16 fields in an indoor facility.
And we would have, so that's with the indoor field and the futsal and the facility. So we would have 10% use of that. And this is fields and a facility that we don't have to buy the land. We don't have to build the fields or the facility. We don't have to maintain the fields or the facility. And we don't have to administer the oversight of the fields and the facility.
Marketing.
Et cetera,
Yeah, all that,
et cetera. So I get where the council members coming from, and
Just so you know, I think it's a great facility. I'm not
I'm not
deterring that.
questioning.
I'm just saying we're taking it from streets.
So, and I actually made this comment at the last work session, and I'm supportive of this project. So I even hesitated to say it, but here's one thing I thought, and we can talk about the deferral agreement and how that gets deferred. And I think we can find a way to quantify that and make that be honest and effective. But let's say that we do defer an impact fee, and they show by their methods that it meets the standard to waive a portion, not the whole thing, but a portion of that impact fee. At some point with the impact to the economy, and maybe it's not here today, but it will be here. I mean, we just approved commercial ground not far from this area. It will be here at some point. If we are running a little short on that street impact fee, we have the ability to, from the general fund that we fund Parks and Rec, we can move money to streets. So I think for the advantage of being able to, not having to buy, not having to build, not having to maintain, not having to operate, I think I can't think of a better way for us to get use of, essentially 2 soccer fields or the facility if we have a program or something. I just think it's such a a great public-private partnership. I think would really be remiss if we didn't move forward with this. And especially because Utah County or Provo City, from the KUTV2 article, it says the city's paying 11.5 million, the county's paying 2.5 million. They're applying for 6 million in state federal grants. So, and the basis that the mayor up there said was because of the economic impact to the city. And I don't necessarily look at it fully as that. I look at it as a benefit to our community. That's another park that we didn't have to buy, that we didn't have to build, that we don't have to maintain. And if at some point we feel like we need to reimburse the street impact fee from general fund, then I think we could address it.
Let me make one clarification. When I said that the after-school program could be merged with, we do have a specific after-school program that is separate and completely separate from whatever rec program would be in place. And in addition to that, part of the facility, the indoor facility, are classrooms where we can have community-based classes. Kids can come and do their homework while siblings are off training or playing or things like that. So it really is more of a case of providing a very holistic impact, not just economic, but having a place where families can go, not just for sports, but for, let's call it financial awareness classes, or kids will have computers there to do homework, that type of thing.
And this is the private sector doing this, not the public sector, which I love that. I love that.
Well, we feel an obligation to the communities that we work in, and we've, been here for 4 or 5 years now, and we really want to give back to the community.
So one way to look at this, and if you have a question, I'd certainly defer and let you.
Well, just a quick question. I think it can be answered quickly. So, and I haven't been in this discussion as long as everyone else, but isn't the reasoning for it coming from the streets is because there's a road, or it's road related that is benefiting? Did I miss that?
Well, it has to do with the way that our impact fees are calculated, and I share your concern. So maybe think of it this way, and we could even adjust the agreement to explain this. Even if we looked at it like a rent payment, or we called it something different, so that we deferred the streets impact fee, they paid it each year, and then we made a rent payment for the first 4 years of $125,000. Could come out of our RAP tax funds, it could come out of our general fund, could come out of our sales tax. We would only do that for 4 years, and then we would have 10% for the life of the facility, as I understand it. Is that correct?
Yes.
So really, we could even look at it as rental, and I actually quite like that concept, because then,
So instead of on the back end, like Councilman Staley doing it, taking it off out of the general fund, you do it on the front end.
yeah. So in essence, they would pay the fee to the streets impact fee, just like anyone else would do. We would do the deferral, so they could do it in stages, but then we would turn around and essentially cut a rent check for the use for the first 4 years. That way, we're really showing that the use that we're getting is a recreational use. And that does open up RAP tax and other funding sources for us, but yet we're keeping streets whole. And we're also not going down maybe that road of impact fee deferrals to where somebody else is going to come in and request these deferrals.
That's a
leaving other
really,
places.
really interesting proposal. I mean, when you talk about budgets, you're talking about your priorities, the city's priorities. So we retain the priority on our streets, but we also, anyway, I like, anyways, go ahead. You were going to make a comment.
No, that's it's an interesting concept, but just so I'm clear, but it's a deferral, but potential not payment on these, correct?
So what I would be proposing, and really it's all the same, I assume, to Dave and his group, is that we, instead of calling it an impact fee deferral, we defer the impact fees. Okay, let me go back to my.
They pay the
exhibit
impact
B.
fees.
So they would pay the initial impact fee of $209,860 upon pulling the permit. Then every year for the next 4 years on the anniversary date, they would pay a $125,000 streets impact fee. So at the end of the fourth year, they've paid all the impact fees just as it's been outlined. The city would pay $125,000 each of those 4 years in rent on the facility if they have met the team criteria in here. So in essence, what we're saying is,
How do we prove that team? I'm not
you know,
saying,
that is a separate question. I think it's a really good
how
one.
do you identify that you've met these goals? I mean,
The reason we
just telling us you
selected
did,
this
or-
particular metric was that we could have done it on footfall, but there's no gate. So you can't count how many people are physically there,
Yeah.
but you can count how many tournaments are there. You can count how many days the tournaments are. You can count how many teams participate in the tournaments.
Yeah.
Now, for terms of calculations, we use an average of 15 kids per team. Some have 12, some have 18, depends on the age. But as an average, it's about 15 per team. So you can go through and you can count how many teams were there, how many days, and it's an absolutely provable metric. And everything else was just too soft to really say, we can prove this. It was more like, yeah, we think we did or we didn't. But this is an absolute hard metric that you can tie to.
So each year you would provide a report to the city in order to receive that rent payment.
Yeah.
And then you would turn around and remit that rent payment to us to pay for your.
If we did that, I would just want some, you might have not have been
No,
finished. sorry.
that's just sort of the circle I was making.
If we did that, I would want some type of language in there that actually specified that the rental payment of that was partially coming out of the funds generated, just so that it's an easy attachment to the street impact fee, but it's a little bit of a stretch to the rental. But I think you can make it as, I just would like to retain it in the language so that future councils or anybody could kind of see it more clearly.
Well, and in 4 years, the rent would cease.
That's right. It would just be for 4 years. Then after that, it would be perpetual.
Business as usual.
We can call it something other than rent. I mean, I'm just coming up as we go along here, but we can call it a use.
While Councilman Coates is thinking about that, I just want to go back to Councilman Staley's pointing out about the educational use of that. I think that's wonderful. As my understanding is that it takes like the equivalence of a master's degree to understand offsides in soccer. So I think that's great. Start those kids early.
And 2015 vision.
No comment to that.
2015 vision helps too.
Mr. Hubbard, may I ask a question?
Sure.
And this is a question and a comment. Soccer is still the fastest growing sport in America, isn't it?
It is.
In the youth.
Yeah. And there's currently I think about 80,000 kids in Utah that play it. And one of the things that is driving this is that you host tournaments in this area quite often. But the problem is that half of your tournament participants go to Mesquite because there's just not enough fields here. So you worry about Washington City, the whole county is losing the revenue because they're just not here.
And if they were all like Sullivan Fields, we would be booked solid.
If we need more than 16 fields, Sullivan's our first choice because those are currently the best fields here.
Yeah. So, and I like the adjustment to that because while I recognize all of the, the benefits to it, one of my concerns is that, we're going to see a pretty high impact on our roads. And I think, so I like keeping the dollars in the roads impact fee. I think we'll need to improve some roads. This will be a lot of traffic, a lot of people in and out. Can you maybe speak to, I think I've asked you this question before, but I'm not sure if you were looking at road study or impact studies, but is that part of your assessment at all as to helping guide people in and out of your facilities, or do they just do they just on the fields in an irregular enough manner that they're just kind of, doesn't surge? Or
there's three ways to ingress and egress.
Yeah.
You can go to Southern Parkway, Washington Fields, and you can also go, out east out of Stuckey Farms or south out of Stuckey Farms. And what we've done is we'll rotate the fields, and we've put parking lots in the plan, kind of interspersed between the fields so that we're not loading up one area and then one particular route. So they'll be able to come through all three areas. And we will rotate the fields based on usage, based on conditions, based on the size of the teams, the age of the teams, that type of thing. So we will do a full rotation to make sure that it's spread out.
it doesn't benefit you at all to vacate all those fields at the same time, because it creates traffic for you and just get bottlenecks in and out of your.
The truth of the matter is, and you'll know this from Sullivan Fields, that every hour and a half on the hour and a half, you got 500 cars going this way and 500 cars going that way.
So would that tie into 3650 somewhere?
What is
I'm
30
just,
I'm
I'm
not
just
sure what
throwing this out.
36
So we,
is.
we just completed a new belt route. So
It's south of that, but
Yeah.
people would come
I'm-
up.
they
I'm
would
trying to
come up
figure-
36. So if you're
I'm trying
thinking
to
of
figure out
Salt
where
Lake,
that
team-
is exactly.
if you're thinking
There's
about
the-
Salt Lake teams, if I was a coach, I'd bring them down. I'd bring them over going towards Hurricane on that brand new route and come down around the
Yeah. You
route.
mean the continuation of.
And it's right
If you're
there.
coming from
Parkway
Vegas or
down.
California, Mayor,
You come
which
off exit 2 and come up around on the
we
belt route.
completely bypass.
A lot of our
Here.
roads.
So can I just ask where the specific location, and again, I haven't been in the discussion as long as everyone else, but there's a turf farm there. So we're looking at just
Drew, do you have the map? You can,
It's kitty corner
Scroll
to the
up.
turf.
kind of kitty
farm.
corner to the south and west of that.
Yeah, so you'll have the turf farm, then you'll have a residential development.
So it's right in this area,
Um,
right? I guess there's the end of the airport right there.
Okay, so it's,
So just north of
it's
that.
in the end of the airport. Hang on, let's see if we can get that spot. Okay, you see where Warner Valley Road is?
Yes.
Okay, if you come off of that to, I guess it's southwest. Okay,
Yeah,
you'll have a little
southwest
residential
direction.
development and then back behind that.
So it goes
and
over
then
to
into
the
airport
ridge.
access is
Does
where
it go over to
is.
the ridge?
No, it
Or
doesn't go
not
over
quite
the
that
ridge.
far?
It stops at the ridge.
Okay.
Well, actually, it doesn't stop at the ridge. You see the dirt road there?
Yes.
It stops right around there and then it goes up towards the airport runway.
Okay. Thank you for that.
So I'm gonna ask Jeremy, I'm switching subjects onto the water, back to the water. It sounds like, do we need to worry about what if you don't secure the water? Do we need to write something in that?
So it is number 9 in the contract. Culinary water is provided to our system, so for bathrooms and drinking fountains. But it explains here that the owner is responsible to connect to those wells. Washington City will not be responsible to provide any water treatment to the water provided to the complex.
But
We-
what if something goes bad? Then the deferral agreements, like say he needs water. I'm just asking, say something goes bad in his negotiations, so we have no control over that negotiations with Stuckey Farms.
So we had an example, the Telegraph Towers building
Your space.
came before the council at its time for deferral agreement of different impact fees. It was well debated and discussed. It passed not by a majority, but it passed. And then things went south for the ownership and the economy. When a deferral agreement goes bad and a project just bottoms out, the city ends up unpaid. And the city can file a lien against the property and collect it against some future owner that's trying to make, commercial use of it. But that's one of the risks of a deferral agreement is you only get paid if this contracting party is around to make those payments that have been decided and agreed to. So in this case, you mentioned the water. Water's not always guaranteed. Your well could go dry, your water could go foul. Like there's things that could happen. They're probably not likely. This was farm water that's called Stuckey Farms because all of this was once used for agricultural purposes. But yeah, let's say the water becomes an issue. This contract doesn't require the city to produce bulk water to this project. And if they can't complete their project because of a water situation, they will either have to choose to pay the assessed amounts or default under the deferral agreement and deal with the reality of a default under that.
So at that time, if they could come back and request, but we have the option to decide if that's best for the city or not.
That's correct. We would much prefer them come back and discuss than what happened on Telegraph Towers, but that was a pretty extreme situation there.
It was brought up earlier. I'm just curious about the quality of the water there. May not be good for culinary, but some water that isn't good quality is not good for grass and such. Do you know that's, you're okay
This
with
is the
that?
same water that's feeding the turf farm.
It is,
So-
okay. So it must be good then.
That's a good question. Yeah. Any additional questions for Dave? Excuse me, Mr. Hubbard. Sorry about that.
Dave's fine.
Anybody ready to make a motion?
If there's no further discussion, I'll take a stab at a motion that we approve an impact deferral agreement for Red Slope Soccer with the additional language as explained by City Manager Red about accounting for the rental or whatever term him and finance decided to use for reimbursing the impact fee deferral.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I will second Councilman Staley's motion.
By way of discussion on the motion, it just occurs to me that we never really did ask the applicant. You didn't object to that. I just don't want to assume on the money, changing it to a different term.
It feels like it's a net zero effect.
Right.
And what this really does is it allows the integrity of the streets to be maintained while providing a method for offsetting the cost that would be imposed upon us. So as long as the language is acceptable, and we'll take a look at it with our lawyers, on the surface, it seems fine.
And just to be clear, I think the discussion that's been incorporated was it is net zero effect on the condition that it meets the metric.
Yeah.
So on that, I like the discussion. I just don't know if I'm there yet with the decision on this, because that's a new concept and I don't think we've vetted it out. We've kind of thrown it out there, but then we're not guaranteed that we can say we don't have general fund or RAP tax fund for it.
I do have a motion in a second, though.
Yeah, I was just doing discussion. So
Well, but that's an interesting concept, but yeah, I mean, you've got, it just opens up different fund sources. I mean, in the scenario, let's say you really actually did have a problem with your streets funds. You had some maintenance that came up that was unexplored. That could really hurt you. Now you've opened it up to all of the city's funds and you could really kind of adjust where it needs to come from. I think you're in better shape with this, but you're right. That financial downturn still might hurt you. But my guess is the same financial downturn that would hurt us would hurt them as well. But who knows the future?
Just while we're doing discussion, just one quick thing. I assume that it's covered in there, or the understanding is that everything access wise and anything related to roads will be all accepted by our public works.
Yeah, I mean, they would have to come back with all of the plans, and I mean, we're not to that point yet, but yeah, they'll still have to approve all of that.
Okay, I do have a motion in a second. We'll do a roll call vote.
Bundy, aye.
Coates, aye.
Ivy, aye.
Ward, aye.
Staley, aye.
All right, thank you, Dave. That's approved.
Thank you, Council.
Move on to item B, consideration to approve a real estate exchange agreement, Elliott Creek LLC. Turn the time over to city manager and city attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll go ahead and take this one. This is an agreement for exchange of land. There's a couple of entity names in there that you may not recognize. They're essentially holding entities. The initial recitals indicate a historical story, but this is the exchange of the property the city acquired from condemnation of the Sandberg property. And the exchange would occur with Mr. Kent Heidemann and his associated entities. The exchange would be, the city would receive the 0.13 acre parcel that would allow access to a proposed Shinabkai trailhead. And in exchange, the city would convey the I believe it's 1.13 acre parcel to Mr. Heidemann. Section 1.5 indicates that in addition to the exchange, there would be a reservation and conveyance of easements, which is on the city parcel that would be conveyed to Mr. Heidemann. The city would reserve an easement for the canal trail. And on the piece that's currently owned by Mr. Heidemann, his entity would convey an easement to the city on the piece that really has no play in the exchange except for it's approximate to the city's piece. And so the city would get the piece that gives access to the Shinabkai property, conveyed access over Mr. Heidemann's piece, and the reserved access over the city's piece. There would also be a payment of $135,000 to the city, which is the difference between the appraisal of the two appraised parcels. There is one detail that in the additional documents that I sent you, there were 4 documents. 2 of them contain legal descriptions of the easement and then a map exhibit of the easements. The legal description and the map exhibits show a 20-foot wide easement. The contract calls for a 50-foot wide easement. The reason the contract calls for a 50-foot wide easement is the city's understanding of the width of the easement that's been historically used for the canal and its maintenance, as well as the easements and conveyances that have been conveyed to the canal company have been 50 feet. But the city has an interest for a 20-foot wide trail portion that we would maintain and build a trail upon. So in theory, if we needed to go to a 50-foot width someday, this contract gives us that ability, but we're really going to build out and convey to a 20-foot width.
So for all clarity, one's 20, that's on the current property owned by Mr. Heidemann. The other one that the city owns is a little wider.
When you say other, the description is?
The description is, so I just wanted to be clear
Right.
that one is on the, where it was requested to be 20 feet wide on the existing property owned on the TL, whatever it is, property, or the Telegraph U P&L property, and the city property is wider because of just the nature of the land.
Yeah, and so the contract, section 1.5 A and B calls for 50-foot wide on both. And what you're aware of is, and what you're referring to is that the exhibits don't show 50-foot width, they show something less than that.
Can we have staff bring that up? There's trails on both sides. Or on both properties. I just want to make sure I'm following exactly.
Yeah,
what you're saying.
these exhibits are in your packet.
Right.
And so you're looking there, that's the city piece. The hash marked parcel just to the right of the cursor is the designed and exhibited trail easement that would be reserved to the city. So the city's deed to Mr. Heidemann's entity would specifically reserve the legal description that's reflected by that hashed parcel. What's the total width there? Somebody read it.
It varies.
It varies based on how it flows, right?
It's like 32 and a half on one side and the other side has a little more. It just from where the
28.
trail needs to go over to the edge, just in case, as soon as design can modify it.
But you'll see if we went to 50 feet wide there, not only do we not plan to need that much width for our trail system, it would have a more substantial impact on that real property and would probably impact the appraisal. Although the canal company claims 50-foot width across there already. Can you go to the,
Is there an exhibit for the trailhead area by chance or?
there's not, we
The,
can,
the question I have on that is just based on what I recall from previous discussion was there was a question whether there was the BLM had to give some area there. If we, we agree with, go with this agreement, is there going to be some hitch there with the BLM and getting something approved with them? Or is that
my
not gonna be-
understanding is this council is motivated to develop that. And so once we have legal access, we would begin the process through the Parks Department to either acquire the lease or the conveyance from the BLM for the land necessary to build and develop a trailhead, or the BLM's considered that they would build it and we would just allow access. And so I think the desire to formalize what's already happening, which is a lot of our citizens make a trip up that mesa every day. The desire to formalize it into a trailhead exists on both the city and the BLM side. And the question really is, what does that look like? Is it an RP&P conveyance by the BLM to the city? Or is it just the BLM builds it and constructs it and the city helps access get there? That would be worked out. But I think the end result is to just formalize what's already happening, which is a lot of people hike up and down there every day.
And my understanding is that that nothing is decided on that. The whole intent of the council and the city obtaining that access is for that purpose, to get a trailhead up there. Nothing has been decided, but my understanding is that staff has actually already talked to the BLM and that they know that that's what we're looking towards.
That's correct. Yeah. And so Drew's got the map there and he just drew the perimeter of what we're obtaining. It's literally just the width of the public road that exists there. And the issue we have is the property owners maintained at least a claim that he can exclude the public through there. I think the canal company would disagree with that. without litigating it, we're just going to obtain ownership of that piece. It'll remove that claim, remove the question of law as to whether or not he has that right. And then that would give the city, of course, connectivity to the existing public road there on Paiute Drive and the ability to then access BLM land just to the east. And then the city and the BLM can make all sorts of plans for use on the BLM land. So yeah, we're removing the private landowners, at least colorful claim as to whether or not he can exclude access. Any of you that have been up there have seen that there's different mechanisms of exclusion that come and go, but hikers seem to always get right through them. But there's at least enough to be observed there that the landowner does maintain a claim that it's not a public passage.
Well, that's what was important to me. That's just such a unique monument in our neighborhood that our future generations can continue to climb up there and take that lofty view over our entire city. I love that. So I think this has taken a couple of councils to bring this about, but I love the direction we're going. I want to maintain the ability for us to hike up there and look out there.
Maybe just for clarity, so the piece that Drew's drawing there appraised at a $45,000 value, the city's piece appraised at $180,000 value. We did not attribute any valuation to the easements because of the city's theory that those easements have already been conveyed and existed. We just are including them so that there's a modern document that shows those conveyed by this landowner to the city, essentially removing this landowner's right to object to those, the city's use and maintenance of those easements for a trail. And
On this side of the property that he's showing here.
No, I'm talking the lower piece.
The lower piece.
Yeah, this one will own in fee, and that's why it's been appraised at a value. The lower one was appraised at 180, and then we're requiring easements on that piece and the piece above it, but there's no value attributed to those easements. We have just required them as part of the deal. And the reason we're not valuing them is we believe that they're already established as a matter of law by historical use and by prior conveyance of other property owners to the canal company.
But essentially we're trading one land for land, and then the dollar amount is just because the one piece is larger, and so we're collecting from him the difference.
Exactly. Yeah, and so it's an exchange that's not perfect. So he's paying the balance of the value.
We're gonna gain trail access on the one side, or we're going to gain access to what we're hoping to get is a future trailhead on the one side, and we're retaining trail easement through the other parcel.
Yeah, on the north end, we're gaining the right to access the BLM land, the legal ownership of the underlying land. On the south side, as to the easements, we're just formalizing this landowner's acknowledgement of their existence. And the reason we're doing that is the plan is to go along and have that same conversation with all the landowners along the canal trail throughout the fields. And it'll be a very similar historical basis as which we've used on this document. And so this would kind of be precedential in that conversation.
Any additional questions?
The only other one I had is in the document you had highlighted the time frame.
Correct.
I'd like to specify
the highlights in the document were meant to be commented on by Mr. Heidemann. He didn't comment. I would recommend that the council approve a 30-day time frame in there for closing.
Okay.
And then as to contact information for Mr. Heidemann, we'll just leave that blank and he can write it in at signature if he wants to.
Okay.
Anybody ready to make a motion?
Is the only condition the 30-day closing?
Correct.
Mayor, I'll make that motion. I'd like to make a motion to approve a real estate exchange agreement, LA Creek LLC, with the condition that there be a 30-day closing.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second by Coates.
I have a motion and a second. We'll do a roll call vote.
Staley, aye.
Ward, aye.
Ivy, aye.
Coates, aye.
Bundy, aye.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. That is approved. Item 13, easements, consideration to approve an amended and restated public utility easement for Washington County School District located at Crimson Cliffs Middle School and High School. Mike Shaw.
Thank you, Mayor. This is just getting some cleanup done on the school sites, the high school and middle school. With the construction of those, they don't do a normal platting of the development. So with this easement, it covers all of our underground utilities that run through their site, giving us access to repair and maintain.
Mayor, if there's no discussion, I'll approve an amendment to the reinstated public utility easement for Washington County School District located at Crimson Cliff Middle School and High School.
Bundy, second.
I have a motion and a second. Again, we'll do a roll call vote.
Staley, aye.
Ward, aye.
Ivy, aye.
Votes aye.
Bundy, aye.
Thank you, gentlemen. That's approved. Anything to report from your assigned committees?
Mayor, I just mentioned that we did have a legislative policy meeting this last week that discussed the recent special legislative session. There were several agenda items, I believe about 10 of them, but nothing to report other than that. I would encourage those that are interested to go online. They're well documented with the action that the legislature took in this special session. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
You're going to get tired of me talking about active transportation every meeting, but I'm going to. You're going to be well up to date. So the Ride Ready program, I've talked about that before with the Bicycle Collective. Washington Elementary students received 12 bikes.
Brand new bikes. They're refurbished.
Yes,
Okay.
both, a combination of those. And so one thing that came out of the committee meeting that was really cool is that from mid-June through July, we'll have a bike drive. It's actually from June 9th to June 30th, excuse me. We'll have a bike drive at the community center. So anybody listening that has bikes that are just sitting in the garage and getting dusty and not used, you're welcome to drop them off at the community center between June 9th and June 30th. And the Bicycle Collective will refurbish those and they'll continue to distribute those to those in need through that Ride Ready program. My understanding through the committee is that the design work on exit 11 at the North Main Street is underway. And of course, this committee's interest is in maintaining trail access. And so one of the accesses that they're concerned with is how do residents from south of the freeway get north of the freeway? And it may end up being through the existing underpass, but UDOT is actually taking the lead on that design. So we're trying to give input as much as we can, but we would certainly love to see that trail connect to the boilers and then go west along the freeway and underneath the freeway along the Mill Creek, and it would tie the boilers in with the cotton mill and Nyson Park. So that's something that we're trying to work with UDOT on. On the Virgin River Trail, that is being slurried with the road project. So that was good. We were able to do that in conjunction. They'll also restripe and do passing lanes for that. A couple of thoughts came up about the Elephant Arch Trailhead and the Grapevine Trailhead. Some in that committee like that kind of rustic idea of where that originally was looked at. Either way, they're thinking that Elephant Arch Trailhead ought to have about 30 parking spots, and some that use that are kind of the backcountry horse riders and stuff. There's a lot of different uses back up there in the reserve. So they're, very aware of wanting to see that Elephant Arch Trailhead be able to accommodate, about 30 cars. And with the Grapevine Trail down off exit 13 to the north there, they think that they probably need about 3 times that many spots with pull throughs and everything. So probably about 10 pull through slots. So that's important. And of course, that grant is still in for the SR7 trails that would take, Warner Valley to 3650 South. So those are a lot of moving parts on trails. They did a survey at Cotton Days and where do you ride most? And the answers were in our neighborhood or on the trails, talking about bicycle riding. And they asked about what prevents you of the 66 responses. This is a pretty good sample of local residents. They said that the heat and time are some of the things that prohibited, but also close proximity to trails in the Washington Fields was also one of the higher getting reasons why they don't bike more. So with all the congestion growth, the people want to be able to ride on the trails. And if I didn't tell you more than you've ever wanted to know about Active Trans, I'd have to borrow your glasses, Mayor, to see more of my notes. I think I'm probably just done.
Hey, if everybody gets really bored with that, I can talk about mosquitoes.
Not nearly as fun as
It's
trails.
really
Are they
kind of
on the
interesting,
trails?
but, no,
Mosquitoes on the
they're
trails?
keeping them down.
Good.
All right, city manager report.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be brief, but one thing I wanted to mention is the street maintenance, and I'm sure everybody has noticed. And if you've enjoyed the street maintenance so far, it's only going to get more difficult. But in many years of doing this, I haven't figured out any way that we can maintain the streets without keeping people off it for some period of time. So I really do appreciate the residents of the patience of our residents, and just recognizing that when we're done, we'll have beautiful streets, and it really helps to maintain the community. But it's going to get worse. Washington Fields Road, Telegraph, some of our real main roads are going to be chip sealed. So I'm thanking everyone in advance for their patience, because it will be.
Do you mind if I comment on your comment? Because I really appreciate the notices that go out. There was a notice that's, in my neighborhood that was going to be there in a week. And then the day before there was a notice saying this is closing down. I think that really helps. I think it's well worth its effort.
Thank you.
So there'll be slurry seal and chip seal.
Yes, the slurry seal project is underway, but the chip seal will be starting. And like I said, it's on a lot of our main roads. For your benefit and everybody else who had always sat home and wished they could sit up here at this lectern, at this dais. Remember, the 2 council spots and the mayor spot are up for reelection June 1st through 7th. It's 1 week deadline. You do have to appear in person at the recorder's office June 1st through 7th to apply for either mayor or the 2 open city council spots. And then we get a lot of awards, and I don't know how much they're worth. They're online places, but I think it's germane to the conversation that we had today. Washington City was named number 62 on the list of top 100 cities for fit lifestyles in the United States. So that included factors such as
Trails, right?
air quality, exercise opportunities, and access to healthy food. So, I mean, I think it ties into 3 or 4 discussions that we had today, but active transportation and maintaining trails and the effort that the city goes through to make sure that Washington City is a place that people can be active and fit. And I think that, the soccer complex even fits into that too. So that's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a need to go to a closed session to discuss the purchase, exchange, and lease of property. So I will entertain a motion to adjourn to that.
So move, Mayor.
Seconded by Bundy.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, let's take a 5-minute break and we'll meet in the council or in the, yeah.
I get to move my Chick-fil-A back in that room again.
dude.
Right, move my keister. The new guy. Which new guy?